hereafter would be but a forgotten memory. He tried to savor it as best he could. South, across the last river and associated lake, they found themselves. They were in wooded areas, east of the lonely hills. Here, they entered a small unnamed village. It was only about 4 major dwellings, though there were a number of mounds. Difficult in the wooded area, but if a man was able to dig out a mound home, the roots of trees only made it that much stronger. As such, the 4 major dwellings, those out of timber and nails, housed not people, but other priorities. One was the house for the local alderman and his family. Another was the village's meeting place, where minor disputes and community gatherings could take place. The last 2 were used primarily for winter storage, to hand out at the needs of the different villagers. The concept of an alderman is relatively old. The north is large enough to fit the rest of the 6 kingdoms into it. As such, out of basic necessity, it became apparent under the suzerainty of House Stark, that a united northern kingdom required a degree of power diffusion. Although great crimes such as murder, rape, and other such issues are still reserved for the authority of the local lord, matters such as civil disputes, minor financial matters, and these sort of matters, can be given to the alderman. The alderman is granted the authority by the local lord to address these issues. Usually, the alderman is the longest residing individual of the village, usually. They are regardless chosen by lot, much like the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. However, unlike the Watch, this election does not hold power. An individual may receive the necessary number of supporters but may still not exercise the power of the title until the lord that rules the land that the village is in approves it. Normally, an alderman serves for their life, yet, as all power is in a lord, the local lord may revoke an alderman's commission. Despite this, Rob learned in his studies with his father when he was younger, that aldermen are not lords. They do not have inheritable titles or lands, they cannot pass serious judgment, and they may not collect taxes. Simply, an alderman was an individual who could handle the minor matters of the villagers, so as not to crowd the local lord with unnecessary work. Regardless, the meeting house was where they found themselves now. It was small, the smallest of the 4 buildings. In it, at the opposite end of the door, stood a makeshift podium, and on either side, benches to sit and listen. Rob stood at the podium. His men and compatriots stood and sat to the right of him, on those benches. The villagers sat on his left. "My lord," an old man croaked out, "I have long served in your house's armies. I served during the war in the east, on the islands in the sea. I served in the king's rebellion." "Calm yourself, man. House Stark thanks you for your service." Rob's strong voice invigorated the man, who was shaking from either old age or nervousness. "How many people live in this village?" "In the village itself, only 7 and 10. However, over 40 families from all over the wood travel here usually once a fortnight for trade and disputes. So together, about 100 people. "Aye, me lord. And of the about 40 or so families have daughters, or sisters." The old man who served as the alderman turned and spoke with a young man. He held some clay tablets. This old man nor any here may have been able to read or write, but they weren't simple enough to not understand how to make simple marks. Of about 40 families, half of them have, or had, daughters or sisters. Of these families, how many of them lost their women? The man was prepared. He gestured with a shaky outstretched arm. "These families here, me lord." In front of Rob stood 6 men. Rob knew he had to take control of the room. He pointed to the first man, who flinched at the sudden movement and attention. "You, what is your name?" "Course, me lord." He mumbled. "What happened, course?" "Moons ago, me lord, me daughter was out fetching shrooms. She knew that we needed them, well it helped with the lack of game, and well. Peace course. Stay alert." "What about your daughter?" Apologies me lord. Me daughter was taken. Her brother heard her yelp he did. He ran into the wood to try and find her. I ran after. She was gone." The man started to tear up. "And me boy, me good boy. He was bleeding he was. I heard howling I did, but I know these would have no wolves lord." At that, the man began to break down. The alderman motioned for the young man assistant to help escort Course out of the meeting house. Rob cleared his throat. His men, who were all battle-hardened in war, shifted uncomfortably. Rob looked at the other 5 men. Are your stories similar? The room was silent. A man seemed terrified and whispered something to the alderman. Alderman. Apologies, me lord. What does similar mean? Rob scolded himself. Same. Are your stores the same, or close to it? A number of eyes could be heard from the men. One stepped forward. Me too. Except my sister was already dead. Marks of a beast on her body. And her face. Her face was unrecognizable. The rest of the men mentioned the same thing. Rob stood from the small step before the podium and straightened himself out. Coming to his full height, even the villagers suppressed a gaze of awe. He was a scion of House Stark, and he would bring justice to his people. I must apologize, good men. I have let you down. I give you my word that I will find the bastard that did this and bring them to justice. He allowed his men and the alderman to escort the rest of the villagers out. He wished to use the meeting house as a sort of council of justice. Carl was to the right of him. Smalljan and Harlow to the right of Carl. Torrin was to the left of Rob, and some other older warriors from the guard stood too. So, what is our evidence so far? That this isn't someone who is careless. This person knew to leave the scene as soon as they heard others coming. 4 of the men never found their daughters and sisters. The 2 who did both arrived when they heard screams. Obviously, whoever our murderer is, they know to leave before someone sees them. Carl continued for Torrin. Hounds. Hounds. Harlow echoed. Rob knows of what I speak of. With the Wolf's Wood so close. These villagers have lived their lives in this wood for centuries. If they say there are no wolves in this area, I am inclined to believe them. If they heard howls, it could only mean one thing. They are using hounds. Smalljan deadpanned. They are hunting these girls like animals. Torrin growled out. They all had sisters. They had mothers. To think there was a man out there who would do this. They were also old enough. All of them knew that if the other girls were taken, that could only mean one thing. Gods. Rob sometimes wondered whether or not the gods should just smite down all of man. The cruelty, madness. Sometimes, it was just too much. Murder is one thing. Terrible, doubtless. But there was a finality to it. The only benefit, if there in fact could be one. But, rape. That was worse in Rob's opinion. That was taking away someone's dignity. A person can die with dignity, but no one can live, truly, fully live, without it. His father, he raised him right. Rob swore then. That when he found whoever did these terrible things, he would unleash the hatred and anger of 8,000 years of Stark history onto this person. Carl cleared his throat. Me lords, perhaps we should rest of the day. Let's start on the morrow. All the other men round the room nodded. They all thought the same thing that Rob did, no doubt. Sabaristan Selmy. Another day, another council meeting. I will not sit here and be accused of such slander. And I do not appreciate being made a fool of in front of the High Septon. You made yourself a fool in front of the High Septon. Enough. Stannis Baratheon, the Prince Regent, Stannis the Stern, slammed his palm down on the table. You will silence yourselves before I throw each and every one of you off the walls of the Red Keep. He growled out. Sir Willis, the first councillor, let out a breath. Apologies, Prince Regent. It's done. Move on. Grand Maester, a new scroll. Yes, my prince. The Grand Maester opened a scroll. Word from Lord Stark of Winterfell. What does Lord Stark report? Lord Stark reports that he has called a portion of his banners. A portion? Yes, my prince. He reports that the Night's Watch requested assistance to send a search party for the First Ranger and some other senior rangers. Very well. It is well within Lord Stark's rights to order such a thing. Write to him after this. Send word that the Iron Throne recognizes the North. Tell him that Lord Stark need only send a raven, and I will send some of the Crown's forces to assist. Does he write who he has given command to? Yes. He reports that his heir, Rob, is currently out of Winterfell conducting a secret investigation into kidnappings and possibly a lord. As such, he has given command to his youngest son, Rickon Stark. Sir Willis looked alarmed at this. Something to add, Sir Willis? Lord Seaworth questioned. Apologies, my prince, but Rickon Stark's reputation is known in the north. We call him the Wild Wolf come again or Rickon of Skane. He is as unruly as his late uncle. Otherwise, a man who you wouldn't want leading men north of the wall. Stannis finished in an even tone. Sir Willis didn't respond. It was almost as if he didn't wish to speak ill of his liege lord's son. But Stannis took the silence as the answer it was. He nodded to himself. For now, we will allow Lord Stark to handle this. He is neither foolish, nor overexcitable. If he has given command to this, Wild Wolf, then so be it. We shall wait for more information. Varys, I want a report soon. The bald and freshly bathed eunuch bowed from the neck. I shall attempt so, my prince. Though the little birds I have north of the wall are practically non-existent. Stannis ground his teeth together. Do what you can. He snapped. Of course, your grace. Any other news? Yes, another raven from Starpike. Everyone round the table groaned. Sir Barristan could see that even Stannis the Stern let out an almost imperceivable twitch of annoyance. The man's face was stone at the very least. Ever since the end of the Lions' War, Titus Peake, the previous lord of Starpike, was attainted. He was attainted for crimes against his liege lord as well as treason against the Iron Throne. During the war, Sir Barristan successfully ended the siege of Starpike by allowing a message to be sent to Titus' undervalued bastard son. The bastard opened the gates in the middle of the night and avoided unnecessary carnage. But I swear to the gods, Sir Barristan, part of me wishes that His Grace the King just executed the bastard along with the rest of them. Armon Peake, formerly Armon Flowers, was not a pleasant man. He has since already found a woman of middling noble blood to cement his position and has already sired a daughter or two, not that he loves them of course, all his father that one. If Titus Peake had only opened his eyes, he would have seen how alike he and his bastard were. Which in turn made Armon Peake ever more grasping, always sending ravens, trying to get this, attempting to curry favor there. 'Twas exhausting. What does he wish for this time? He writes that he expects his license to be delivered to him soon. His what? Stannis, in all his confusion, actually allowed an emotion to show on his face. My prince, we received another raven from him earlier this year. He wished to have rights to the lands to the west of him, the land that Lord Tarly currently holds dominion over. Remember? I had thought that we sent him a letter of refusal. He growled out. Apologies, my prince. I must not have been clear enough in my raven. Grand Maester Gorman reported. Evidently. He retorted coldly. The gall of this man. He expects this. Grand Maester, write to Armon Peake, write to him that he may demand and expect nothing from the small council and the Iron Throne, and that we may expect anything in return. Write to him that if it weren't the misplaced mercy of Sir Barristan he'd be rotting in the same hole in the ground his worm of a father lies in. Write to him that if he insists on continuing this farce, I am more than willing to have him treated the way his father was. The chambers were silent as the last echoes of Stannis' order rung off the walls. Of course, my prince. I shall clean it up a bit and... You shall not. My prince. Other councillors were also turning to look at him confused. Did I lie? Some of them looked between each other. Apologies, my prince, I don't understand. Did I lie? No. Gorman offered. You were fairly in the right. Tarly tersely commented. His words are ridiculous, your message is indeed wise. Sir Willis added. Then I shall not have a raven affixed with the seal of a council that I lead, with false words you will write out every single word that I spoke. And if he takes umbrage with that. I am the hand of the king and the prince regent of the realm, what he does and does not take umbrage to, is of none of my concern. If he is foolish enough to thwart royal command, then he may consider himself sentenced the same as his late father. Send the raven. As stated. Grand Maester Gorman bowed hurriedly. Good. What next? Another conflict between Lords Valerian and Chittering. Something about a port or quality of such. Stannis interrupted Sir Willis. I. Sir Willis twitched. How did you know, your grace? Stannis let out a sigh. This very matter arose years ago. Even at the time, your predecessor, Tyrion Lannister, resolved the issue, but we all agreed that it was only dormant, not settled. And once more, the small council put their heads together and discussed solutions to the next problem. If only a peasant or a minor noble realized the issues that were brought before the small council, perhaps then they'd have an appreciation for all the work they do, Sir Barristan thought to himself. Chapter 12, Beneath the Shadow of Ice. Notes. In this chapter, Sir Roderick refers to Roderick Castle. Simply Roderick refers to Roderick Forrester. Generally. Just read for context. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 310 AC. Rickon Stark. Gods, now this is the life. At the head of a great host. Oh, he wasn't daft, he knew it was truly Sir Roderick in command. Regardless, it was such an exciting time. True to his father's hope, a number of other houses sent men to join the expedition as well. John Burleigh, the heir to House Burleigh, as well as his own son and heir, Ulf, joined them with 20 clansmen. And his own direwolf joined him. Shaggydoak had grown impressively large in the 10 years since his discovery with his littermates. Already over the size of a young horse, Shaggy was as wild as he had always been, growling and yapping at all who approached him, even those loyal men from Winterfell. Carl Castle's brother, Harry on Castle, led another 10 men as well. Will Amsewin commanded the 15 or so men. Lord Gregor Forrester sent 10 men under his heir Roderick Forrester. Lastly, another 6 men and women joined from House Liddell under the second son of Lord Torrhen, Morgan. These men, together with the men directly from House Stark, they numbered near 100. Now that they reached Castle Black, he was sure that they'd receive a few more Black brothers. They had just entered through the gates when the Lord Commander and another man approached. You must be Rickon Stark. His father told him of Jeor Mormont. A long-lived man in a position where many died young. However, he was the uncle to his good sister. And he was a former lord in his right. Despite no longer being subject to the legal affairs of the realm, he still showed respect to him. I assume you are Jeor Mormont, Lord Commander. You'd assume right, young lordling. He motioned to the man to the right of him. This is Sir Alliser Thorne. He serves as the Master-at-Arms for Castle Black. He is also serving as the acting First Ranger until, if, your uncle is found. He nodded solemnly at the mention of his purpose. He introduced his own companions. Here is John Burleigh, heir to Lord Burleigh. This is Harry on Castle, son of Lady Gwyneth Castle. This here is Will Amsewin, brother to Lord Sewin. Lastly we have Roderick Forrester and Morgan Liddell. The Bear of the Watch gave a respectful nod to each of them, as they did to him. Finally, Mormont's eyes widened when he saw his last travelling companion. Roderick, is that you? Sir Roderick swung from his horse and approached the bear. Jeor. Gods, you don't look a day over 60. Both men chuckled at that. Rickon noticed that the man known as Sir Alistair kept a grimace on his face. Once all the final introductions were made, the Lord Commander gestured up to a room in one of the wooden buildings. Come, my lords. Let us discuss this out of this damnable wind. Even the large and gruff mountain clansmen nodded happily at the thought of such a thing. They had barely sat down at the long table when mugs of grog were placed in front of them. It was neither the rich, dark, ale that was infamous in the north, nor was it the lighter, paler, ale that most of the southerners preferred. Rather, it was thick, thicker than any ale he had ever seen. It was slightly bubbly and foamy atop. Rather curiously, a tube-shaped piece of wood was standing in the mug. Jeor Mormont seemed to sense his confusion. Tease a straw, lordling. Stick it all the way down, it bypasses all the nasty stuff. Taking the man's advice, Rickon used his fingers to direct the straw all the way down, stopping only when he felt resistance from the bottom of the mug. He took a great sip. He was a northerner. He had dark ales before. But fuck the gods and call him a fool. Shite. he exclaimed. "That'll melt the fucking wall." His comment made the other men laugh. But out of the corner of his eyes, he could tell that even the older mountain clansman seemed a tad put off by the grog. It's bad. But it's full of energy, that is. The Lord Commander offered sage advice. On a cold night, beyond the wall, on an empty stomach, that liquid has saved more lives than taken it. So thick, almost like a rich bread loaf. Rukun would never admit it, but already, he was feeling his belly fill, better than a normal meal, he thought. He'd be open, it was genius. Due to its attributes as an alcohol, it had a far better storage life than any food that could be prepared. No wonder it was so sought after at the wall. Cheap, easy, and filling better than the best meals available at the wall. "We'll take some barrels, Gia, no doubt helpful on our mission," Sir Roderick added. But the Lord Commander shook his head. "Nay, the drink is so strong, it burns holes in any wood available here at the wall. Sheep offal. It's sturdy enough to carry the drink without it burning through." None of them were turned off by that. Over thousands of years, the North has had to adapt to its climate. If that necessitated eating foods of questionable nature, or consuming drinks that seemed to be the penultimate step to wild fear, then so be it. "Lord Commander, perhaps we can begin our talks of this expedition." Roderick nodded to him. A good sign. Directing the conversation. "Our young lord, let's begin. Sir Alisa, a report on the watch." The acting first ranger nodded and turned his scowled face towards them. After the Lions' War, the watch's numbers raised to nearly 2,000. Greyguard, Reimagate, and Icemark were the first posts we decided to re-garrison. But even still, such a long wall, only still few men to man it. We cannot send a dedicated party north of the wall. Much of our manpower is currently being used to repair and refurbish those castles mentioned. Any delay, and it could cost us when winter arrives. "Thank you, Sir Alistair." The knight only sneered at him and turned back to the Lord Commander. Rukun looked to Roderick for assistance, but he seemed confused as well. At this point, said knight spoke to. "How many of the watch are rangers?" Gia nodded once more to Sir Alisa. "According to our latest reports from our other castles, about 700 are dedicated rangers. Builders occupy our greatest division of labor currently. With the mentioned castles, we needed a great number of them. About 200 brothers who are currently serving as builders, are actually rangers, but we needed the manpower in order to finish the forts in time for winter. Your raven to my father mentioned that you would still be able to assist us with guides and a handful of rangers." Once more, Sir Roderick nodded subtly in approval. But instead of answering, both the Lord Commander and the Master-at-Arms for Castle Black looked at each other in worry. Without saying a word to each other, the Mormont addressed the rest of the room. "My lords, my good men. It has been a long journey for you, no doubt. Please, I will have a few stewards show you to your lodging. I will finish up here with Lord Rukun and Sir Roderick." Although the other men could sense that not all was well, a few nodded and stood. Shortly thereafter, the room was sparse other than himself, Sir Roderick, and the two black brothers. Gia Mormont gave a great sip from his own grog, and impressed Rukun without recoiling from it. Leaning over, he looked betwixt himself and Sir Roderick. You heard right, Lorderling. However, well over half of the current rangers are very inexperienced, the other half is spread across the length of the wall." Sir Roderick let out an angry sound. "Is that to say that you have no men to assist us with?" Lord Stark was assured that we would have knowledgeable men of the watch to guide us. "Watch your tongue. The watch protects. I will not sit here and listen to the complaints of a man who doesn't even know the wall, nor the brothers who guard it. Watch yourself." Sir Alisa, though his words were of respect, Rukun, and all, could hear the underlying tone. "You learned of the wall for punishment for fighting for a madman. I was born in the north, bred by it. I know more of the cold than you could ever know." Sir Alisa grimaced and stood, a hand on his pommel. "Sir Alisa." Gia Mormont stood up and glared at the Master-at-Arms. "Remand yourself back to the garrison. Lord Commander, I urge you to. Now!" he roared. The room was silent before Sir Alisa removed his hand from his pommel. He turned and stormed out of the room. Slamming the door behind him so hard, Rukun was sure that it should have collapsed. The remaining 3 stayed quiet until the Lord Commander let out a sigh. You must excuse his behavior. Ever since the rebellion, he has dedicated himself to the watch. Though, perhaps the memories of such a time are still fresh for some. Sir Roderick, a veteran of Robert's rebellion himself, must have agreed, as he too stood up. Some memories never leave. He cleared his throat. Excuse me, Lord Commander, Rukon, I must have some fresh air. Sir Roderick too left, leaving Rukon alone with Gia Mormont. That could have ended far more violent. I'll take your word for it, Lord Commander. Regardless, I must insist, why are you acting odd ever since Sir Roderick mentioned us bringing guides from the Night's Watch? The Lord Commander looked at him. Not a hard stare, nor an angry gaze, but one of weight. A heaviness was on his eyes. A heaviness that only came from a life long lived. The matter of scouts and guides from the watch is not a problem, in of itself. However, the most experienced ranger, who is readily available to serve as your lead scout, well, it could make the entire expedition a tad difficult. How so? Well, it's none other than Sir Jaime Lannister. Ah. Oh. Yes. I see. I hope you do. Will it be a problem? The Lord Commander took another sip of his grog before retorting. Sir Jaime came to the wall a broken man. In many ways, I hadn't expected him to last long here, if not the cold, then the wildlings, or himself. For the first year here, I would send a steward up to the top of the wall whenever he was posted on watch just in case he got the idea of taking a long hike off the short path. And yet, since his arrival, he began to fit in far quicker than any expected. Perhaps it is the martial lifestyle that suits him. He always was infamous for being a knight and soldier at heart. Even before his disgrace, I could see he would never be his father's heir. Will he make a move against me? All men forsake their previous lives to become a brother. Gia responded harshly. But Rukon was the wild wolf, he didn't back down. Did Sir Alisa? The Mormont didn't respond but let out a humph. Rukon was proud of that one. What you need to worry moreover is his skills. If he is unskilled, why attach him to this party? Oh, he knows the lands beyond the wall well, and there isn't a brother here who wouldn't pray for Sir Jaime to fight wildlings alongside them. But even after a decade here at the wall, his skills at starting even a basic fire are useless. If it wasn't so necessary in this life, it would be quite humorous. Well, that's quite alright, all the men in my party are experienced at it, including myself. Has Sir Jaime been informed of this? Not yet. He only just returned from a patrol 2 days ago. He had led a party of 6 or so brothers to patrol White Tree. We had received reports of strange happenings occurring there. Strange? How so? Words of walkers of ice and snow on the wind, of shadows that haunt the darkness of woods and forests. Surely you don't speak of the others. Rukon had once been enamored with the stories of Old Nan, but he had grown out of the fearful states that it would put him in. They are naught but stories to frighten children. What are stories, if not the deeds and histories of people long past? Life turns to story, and story to legend. It isn't long until legend becomes myth afterwards. I see. What of the patrol? Nothing. The village sports a small number of about 5 families, with another dozen or so surrounding them. There were no signs of any life at all. But as they were leaving, they reported that figures from beneath the snow burst forth. Only 3 of the 6 made it back. Ern Florent had apparently been the first to fall, only to rise back forth and attack his former brothers, Bright Blue Eyes reported. Rukon shivered. Stop trying to scare me, Lord Commander. You're scared. Good. Mormont leaned forward. That's how I know you're still human, Lorderling. How come you haven't sent word to my father about sightings of the others? I have. And the Red Keep. No, I was a northerner before I was a black brother. I know of how the South think and speak of us. If I had sent a raven south, I would only be laughed off. So why are you telling me all of this? Because you need to know that this journey of yours, it is not just to find your uncle. But that should only be your secondary concern. You dare. I have traveled this far to assist in the location of. Sit down, boy. Mormont stilled himself when he heard growling from the other side of the door. Control yourself. You cannot afford to lose your mind now. Think of it, I need you to assist my men in capturing one of these whites, these bodies under their control. With that, you can travel south and show the realm the truth of our perils. You have yet to convince me. I need not to, surely you will find out yourself when you go beyond. Make no mistake, boy, whether or not you find your uncle is known only to the gods, but I absolutely know that you will undoubtedly run into the others while you are out. When that happens, think back on this moment, and hope that what little remains of your courage has slipped away. You can only run from them. You cannot hide from them, nor fight them, your steel will shatter the moment you cross blades with them. Rukan let out a harumph. I think we are done here. Doubtless, you have consumed too much of this grog, your mind is eating itself outward. As Rukan was turning to the door, he heard a chuckle. It was an eerie thing. He spotted a raven in the corner of the room, he had been surprised he had not seen it before. It just kept on laughing, a loud and shrill sound, but yet somehow still hollow, as if it sucked out the joy from the air. The Lord Commander remained at his seat, only moving to stare at him in the eyes. Have care, Rukan of Skane. The lands beyond the wall are far more wild than even you may believe. Keep yourself warm, and never let another man out of your sight. Rukan, still believing he was being made a fool of, countered. Any other wise words to impart? Yes. When you are beyond, and suddenly the forest grows quiet, when all the birds and insects and animals grow silent, as if the land itself has turned into a grave, run. 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 The raven chirped from its perch. Run. 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 Rukan rolled his eyes and opened the door, meeting the fresh air and cold aroma. But as the door shut behind him, he could help but hear the raven continue its incessant chant. And he swore a shiver ran down his spine. Rukan had awoke from his small guest chambers. He had shared the room with Shaggy and Roderick Forrester. The two were still relatively young compared to the other men that had joined them. During their travels to the wall, they had grown to enjoy each other's company. I swear I'm so cold, I am this close to taking that torch and shoving it up me ass, at least then I'll have some semblance of warmth. Roderick japed. Do you enjoy shoving things up your ass, Roderick? I hear of a flower in Highgarden and Storm's End that would appreciate your presence. Yeah. Fuck off. Rukan had almost laughed, if the cold air hadn't stolen his breath from him as Roderick opened one of the window. Fucking hell, man. Get up, Stark, the air is good. Piss off. The two of them had barely gotten changed when they heard a knock at their door. It's unlocked. Roderick shouted. Unceremoniously, the door was barged open, and three men stood in the opening, the glare of the day, shrouding them in a deep darkness. Who goes there? Roderick queried friendly. The three figures entered deeper into the room, before one of them closed the doors behind him. Already, the temperature of the room began to rise, the small fire in the place working hard to warm the cold room once more. The figure on the right was a large man. A thick neck led to a slow-moving body. Rukan thought that the man best appeared as an Uruk. The figure on the left was a much smaller man, paler skin, but very big ears. He was whistling a gentle tune to himself. The figure in the middle tall, he had a head of golden hair. Neither Rukan nor Roderick Forrester had ever met a Lannister in person. But there was no doubt. There was only one known Lannister at the wall. Sir Jaime Lannister. Well, if it isn't another pup. Sir Jaime. No insult. Doubtless your brothers and father spoke ill of me. My father was never your biggest fan, but neither Robb nor Edwyle spoke terribly ill of you. How kind of them. As for myself, I would rather judge a man myself, than allow my thoughts to be waylaid by others. Mature. Almost too so. Doesn't sound like the behavior of a wild wolf. Pardon, I must forgive then for a lack of reputation. T's all right. Reality is often disappointing. Have experience with that. The three others looked between them. The words and tone were friendly, but all could sense a tension in the air. I hear we'll be the best of companions, beyond the wall together. So it is. Should my party and I concerned about that? And why would there be anything concerning? Don't play games with me. Rukun finally snapped. Sir Jamie finally cracked a smile. There's the wild wolf. Hello there. Sir Jamie smirked, and the other two black brothers chuckled. But just then, Shaggydog strutted from around the corner. The two brothers' eyes went wide, and both went for their hilt. But Rukun noted that Sir Jamie's eyes went wide, and his arms hung stiff at his sides. As Shaggydog approached, Rukun intertwined his fingers with Shaggy's hair. What's wrong, Sir Jamie? Scared of, what was it you called us, a pup? Jamie stood ramrod straight, not moving a muscle. Finally, the large man cautiously moved forward. Is the beast trained? He is a direwolf, no one owns him, but he listens to me. Then I'll have to trust you on that, me lord. My name's Gren. Well met, Gren. I am Rukun of House Stark. All of Castle Black knows this, me lord. Word is you're here to help us. You heard well then, Gren. I am here to help find my uncle, the first ranger. The other man stepped forth. And you'll help us with the ice monsters. Rukun rolled his eyes again. Surely the Lord Commander put you up to. No. You will be silent. Sir Jamie snapped. For the first time since his arrival, he was serious, instead of simply making japes and having fun. Until you've huddled the man next to you for warmth and safety, I'll not have another man accuse us of making lies. Says the Lannister. Coming from the Stark. Your ancestors would be smacking you if they saw what has happened to their house. Watch your words, Sir Jamie. And watch what's around you. Take a good goddamned look around. The walls of Winterfell are what, 80 feet high? Aye. So ask yourself this, Rukun of Skane, Sir Jamie sneered. Who were your ancestors so worried about, they'd build a wall of ice, 700 feet high? Home. Rukun had no answer. Sir Jamie huffed and turned and left, the two black brothers following after him. Rukun gave Roderick a look before exiting the room himself, finally taking in the morning air. He watched as some brothers trained in the tiltyard below, and others taking care of their chores. As he walked along a balcony, and strode down some stairs to the mess hall, he saw a shadow pass over him. Looking up, flying was a black-colored bird. Rukun realized it was a crow. He realized it was the same of the Lord Commander. Reaching the mess hall, he was just about to enter when he heard a noise. Looking up, the same raven had perched on a shack wall, staring directly at him. Run! 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 Taking one look around the yard and the raven, Rukun hurried in to break his fast. In a far more upset mood than he had awoken. Notes. I do hope you enjoyed this chapter. This was amongst my most favorite chapter so far in terms of writing. I had a great time with it. Chapter 13, Lions and Wolves, Clothed in Red. Notes. Warning. Mentions of stillbirth in the second POV of this chapter. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 310 AC. Tyrion Lannister. So many interesting people, so many interesting stories. Just the prior fortnight, a whore in Lannisport had told him of a legendary pirate, who instead of bearing the eyes of a man, bore 2 emeralds within his sockets. She had told stories of 8-legged dogs, with 3 tongues and 7 eyes. The only thing he had thought at the moment was how happy he was that he paid for the services of 3 whores, so he understood the 3 tongues quite well. He had chuckled to himself in that moment. He had learned that one of the whores was formerly of the north. His interest piqued, and so he had stayed in her company long after her services were complete. Beyond all his sinful vices, he was a very curious man. Her mother had traveled south during Robert's rebellion, marching in the armies of Eddard Stark. Her father had brought her south after, to seek her out. What they learned was that her mother had died on campaign. Her father, staunch as any respectable northerner, simply accepted and moved on. He had settled first in the Riverlands, then, he had moved to Lannisport to open a trading shop. He had died with debts outstanding. She was forced to put herself in the whorehouse to pay off those debts. It was an interesting tale. One that left her surprisingly calm. When he had asked her about that, she had replied simply that she was a northerner. She may have grown up in the Westerlands, but she never forgot where she had come from. So, he paid her debt. It was not an act he did often. If he paid off the debts of every sorrowful tale, he'd have no coin left for a crumb of bread. But he was more of his father than he dared believe, he saw it as an exchange. She had told him of a great tale, one of tragedy, bravery, culture, and intrigue. Therefore, he had to pay his own debt. When he told her that she had paid him off, she had thanked him calmly and without great emotion. She told him that she would gather what she had and attempt to catch a vessel or trading caravan northward. As he watched her leave the main room of the whorehouse, he couldn't help but be impressed at the world view of northerners, and amusingly berating himself for practically giving away some of the best whoring services he had ever paid for. But that is what he lived for. Beyond the whores, the wine, the stories, the legends, he lived for people. The happiness, the sadness, the strength and weakness. The connections. After such a storied evening, he had, instead of riding back up to Casterly Rock, strolled through the avenues of Lannisport. With trusty Sabron behind him, passing the manse of his distant cousin, Jafford Lannister, master of Lannisport, passing the great trading plaza. Passing the U-shaped canal allowed smaller vessels to row further into the city. He reached the water. For the most part, all he could see was the bustling docks and harbors of the city. He was about to turn, to call it an evening, when something caught his eye. A vessel smaller than most trading cogs, was about to depart the harbor. Due to its small size, it had not possessed an anchor. As such, it appeared the crew had filled barrels and sacks with sand and filled the hull with it. Such added weight lowered the vessel, essentially beaching it on the sand under the water. Crude, but effective in keeping the vessel in port. But as he watched them preparing to set off, he saw the crew members simply open the sacks and hack open the barrels and pour it over the side into the water. And suddenly, he had a thought. Stop that. You what? The crew members looked up, expecting some guard or another. Sabron spoke up from behind him. He told you to stop what you're doing, lads. Eventually, seeing the lack of work from his crew, the vessel's captain shoved himself through. Get back to work, maggots. The captain turned, and seeing the red sash of House Lannister, apparently thought himself to be a customs officer. What you want? We've broken none of your damnable laws. But Tyrion had something far more interesting on his mind. What are you doing? He pointed at the barrels and sacks of sand. The captain and crew looked confused. We be dumping our load. Where do you get the sand? You're serious? The sea surrounding the city is shallow enough. Before coming into port, we'll throw buckets off the stern of the vessel, and dredge sand for use. And you just dump it overboard when you're done. You blind imp. Using his hand, Tyrion scooped up a small handful of the sand, brushing it against his fingers. His mind far away as the crew and even Sabron looked at him with confusion. Finally, the captain called out, Your mind. We got a schedule to keep. Yes, apologies. He muttered to himself. The captain rolled his eyes and motioned for his crew to continue. He turned around to face Bronn. Come, we need to reach the rock, quickly. And Errand Knight moved rapidly, for the knight had never seen the little lion so serious. Are you sure about this, little lord? Bronn asked behind him. Sabron Blackwater was not a fearful man. He had openly faced knights and lords and had survived all of it. He was a rough-talking, gold-spending, rabble-rousing man. But even he was wise enough to fear the retribution of Tywin Lannister. After all, the common folk say never wake a sleeping lion. His cub was about to do just that. Tyrion stalked forward with singular purpose that he had never shown before. 2 red cloaks were standing guard outside his father's chambers. Tyrion recognized them. The red cloaks that Tywin Lannister surrounded himself with were more than just the regular guards. They were of the Lion's Fangs. The Fangs were the elite guard of Casterly Rock. Each one had made an oath to the gods they worship. They had each volunteered to have their tongues removed from their mouths and put themselves through rigorous martial training. In return, Tyrion's father had guaranteed that each guard's families would be granted small chambers within the rock, more among the servants of course but still greater than most small folk. They were guaranteed daily food and drink, and would be given much greater pay than the average guard. Red Cloaks of Lannisport were given a monthly pay of 3 grouts. The last month of the year they'd be given a copper penny as well. The Lannister Honor Guard, the standard guard of the Rock, were given a monthly pay of 1 penny. The last month of the year they'd be given 10 pennies. The Lion's Fangs. They were granted a monthly pay of a silver stag. On the last month, they'd receive 3 golden dragons, far more coin than any small folk would normally ever even see in their life. Tyrion's father, despite ruling with fear, understood that loyalty could also be bought. And the Fangs were very loyal. So much so that they would even cross the air, to protect their lord. Such was found out when upon his approach, the 2 guards loudly stomped to block the doorway and crossed their spears. "Please my good men, I must speak with my father urgently." Because of their surgery, they only stared in response. The little lord requested entry to his father. Sir Bronn smirked. One of the guard's eyes never left him, while the other turned stoically to peer at Bronn, before once more slowly to return to Tyrion again. Tensions were rising, when all 4 heard muttered words from beyond the door. Slamming the door open, Tywin Lannister stood. He had not the apparel of state or of the day, but neither nightwear. "Tyrion." His father sounded either surprised or annoyed, probably both. "What are you doing here, finished with your whores?" he added derisively. But Tyrion wished to get his thoughts out before he forgot them. So, in an act of complete courage, he barged past his father into his private chambers and began talking. "I've found a way, father. A way that we can make up all this." He stopped himself before turning and seeing the guards, Bronn, and his father gaze at him in anger and confusion. "Bronn, you must excuse my father and I. You have the rest of the night." Bronn shrugged and turned without a second thought. One of the Fangs motioned towards him, but his father simply waved him away. He closed the door on him. Only his father and himself in his chambers. "For what reason have you interrupted my rest and dared enter my chambers uninvited?" His father's voice was steady, but there was a degree of anger. "Father, I've had an idea for our income problem." Tywin Lannister stood still for a moment, sizing him up. Finally, he gave a simple nod and gestured to the 2 chairs in the chambers. "Sit. You will speak of this realization." As he sat down, his father moved to pour 2 chalices of watered wine. Giving one to him, Tyrion took it and simply sat it on an end table next to the chairs. "So, do tell." "Sand." His father was in the midst of a sip when he stopped and fixed him with a glare. "I have neither the time nor the patience to deal with your japes, Tyrion." "I'm serious, father." Tyrion was surprised at how much he wished his father to listen to his idea. After all that his father had done to him, he certainly shouldn't be seeking his approval, yet here he was. "You have until I finish this chalice," Tywin stated, taking another sip. "Think about it. Westeros has yet to establish any source of glass-making crafts shops. All the glass used, from the Red Keep to the glass houses of the north, are bought at high prices from Tioche and Pentos. Let us purchase the services of a number of glassmakers from these cities, then pay them to share their secrets, or at the very least stay in the Westerlands to make glass here. And the sand. There is sand all around us, father, and I am sure the craftsmen of the free cities can work with other sedimentary materials as well. Just this evening I encountered a trading cog that had dredged sand in the harbor to weigh itself down." "Elaborate." "If we can establish the first glass-making houses in Westeros, we'll have a near monopoly on all glass purchased. We can sell it for cheaper, undercutting the Asozi, cornering the market. And yet, who will seek it out?" He knew his father wasn't a fool. He was testing him again. "The North is always in need for more glass. They will definitely be our largest customers, and a good source of income during the slow winters. The Crown lands will no doubt wish to buy for more decorative and artistic purposes. The Riverlands will seek it simply to trade with others. The Vale has no immediate need for a great amount, but should they need to repair a September or another, cheaper to pay our prices. And Dawn. The Reach. As for the Reach, those pious fools would no doubt seek us out, no doubt to furnish their increasingly large sects. And, Dawn. Don't speak to me as if I were a fool," he snapped. His eyes widened and looked at his father. He glared at him still. "Continue." Tyrion gulped. "Dawn will never purchase large degree of goods from the Westerlands so long as you are alive. It is simply a non-starter. And the Iron Islands. Tyrion gazed at his father in annoyance. After a moment, Tywin simply nodded. Good, Tyrion. Very good. We'll discuss more later. Now, leave my chambers before I have the fangs throw you from the top of the rock. Never a smile or even a nod of affirmation. Tyrion left his father's chambers nearly skipping in happiness. A first time for everything he guessed. Sansa Dane. Her life was not as she had expected. Though, perhaps she had grown out of her childhood expectations. She had been forced to grow up quickly. Even though she knew that it was approaching, her family's discussions about her possible marriages truly set it into her how far she would need to grow. She was neither a brave nor genius warrior as her elder brothers were, perhaps she was not the wild shield maiden her sister was. But Sansa would always insist she was smart. She always had the best marks from Maester Lewin growing up, she always knew the most of the North and other kingdoms. But, what she realized, was while her intelligence may have been superior to the other Stark cubs, her common sense was less so. Of course, until she grew older. She had once envisioned herself marrying the kindly prince, becoming a queen loved by all. Or perhaps, a gallant lord who would protect her from all woes. But reality is most oft disappointing. She learned of the crimes of the prince, of the queen. She knew of the war that erupted. Dawn may not have been a party in it, but it certainly observed it. After the initial honeymoon phase was over, she realized she actually never loved Edric. But after some ravens from her mother, she was open to allowing love to grow. He was kind, of course, and polite, but there was a distance between them initially. After their wedding, of which she was ecstatic her father made it, but saddened the rest of the family had not, she and Edric had fulfilled their wedding vows. She decided that perhaps others may call him Ned, she would never, reminded her too much of her father. Still, no love yet. Friendship and companionship had bloomed, but not love. Looking back, she had wished they found love an easier way. She had never told her family. Only Edric, the household, and the Maester knew. She had grown with child. But the child had not lived. The trauma afterward was more than heartbreaking. Her unborn daughter. How cruel the world was, to take life not yet born. Edric and she had called the girl Ashna after his mother. Love blossomed as he held her, she cried. She knew he did too. Never once in front of her. At first she thought the babe mattered not to him. But she saw him once. He did not know, but as she walked past the godswood of Starfall, she heard him. Not a great cry, but a pitiful one. She entered only so far as to watch him. Men were often disappointing, but perhaps, so were many women. She never told him she saw him, she learned it after he was trying to be strong for her. She swore she'd never doubt him again. Their love began in earnest after that terrible event. When she learned she was with child again, all around congratulated her and Edric. But in the quiet moments, in lulls of feasts and gatherings, their eyes would lock. She knew the look, it was not one of love or lust. It was of fear. They feared for unborn children to come. But as her belly swelled, the fear lessened. Maybe, this babe would live all the way. When the time came, and her back spasmed, and pain tore through her, fear came back with a vengeance. Throughout the entire birth, she was frightened the wet nurse or the Maester would tell her it was lost. Then, the cries of a new thing, a beautiful thing. When she held Garin in her arms for the first time, all her dread was swept away, like the waters of the Torrentine. By the time her second, Alden, came along, terror came back. Would Garin survive the journey north, to her ancestral home? Would Alden survive the birth? Regardless, she knew, come what may, Edric Dane, her husband, was with her. They spoke of Ashna sometimes. On the nights that dreams refused to carry her or him off, they would talk. Sometimes, to thoughts of her. The tears were always fresh. In time, however, the regret and self-hatred left, leaving only sadness in its wake. Bad, yes, but not as much as the other emotions combined. Of happier thoughts, her siblings and her grew closer together. Looking back on memories, she sometimes blushed with embarrassment. She was not a nice sister to Arya, and perhaps demanded things of too many people. Ravens allowed her to share stories and information with her distant brothers and sisters. Her and Arya, at least over letter, were doing very well now. Arya told her things, of her own husband, of her wishes, that she told no one else. Rob and Edwyle's ravens always made her laugh, and she hoped her own to them did as well. Bran's letters were always different. Not that they weren't close, but more informational. Sansa always held the belief that Bran would have made a great maester. Rickon, so young that she never truly got to know him past the baby stage, was like meeting a new person. She could not wait to travel north with Edric and Alden, to visit with her family before taking Gurren back south. Her life had not been a perfect one, far from it. She had lost much. Time, however, can heal great wounds, wounds that have no other way of healing themselves. Notes. I hope everyone had a happy holiday season. Chapter 14, A Sickness of Cruelty. Summary. Warning. This chapter is really fucking dark. Mentions of sack, murder, torture, flaying, the such. If I am being honest, dear readers, I am not in a good place. Already, 2024 is such a shit fucking goddamn year. I haven't really told anyone but a friend or two, but I'm really in a dark place. I think perhaps I poured some of that sadness and anger into this chapter. I had always meant to write this, but not to this degree. If you dislike this chapter, I understand, but please don't mention it. In some ways, writing this chapter really saved me already, no matter how insignificant. I cried doing it, and just so much pent-up anger and sadness and emotions I can't even describe tbh. Anyways, sorry to let out person shit. I hope you like it. You've been warned. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 310 AC. Robb Stark. He was in a forest. That much he knew. But the pines, they were all farther away from each other than normal. Most of the North's forests were very dense, not this one. He heard a howl on the wind. He turned. He couldn't see anything. The whole forest was covered in a blanket of fog, so thick he could barely make out the trunks of the pines only an arm's length away. Another howl. He felt a feeling of fear. Trepidation. He did not know. Then, out of the fog, he saw a figure close in. A man, from what he could tell. It was stomping forth with nefarious purpose. Robb felt the urge to run. The primal part of his mind telling him to flee. He couldn't help but to listen. He turned once more and started running. But why did he keep tripping on roots and rocks? Was he so clumsy? Another howl. He turned. The man was still following him. With wide eyes, he noted that the figure was clothed in all maroon. A dark red. He had seen that red before. That was the red of a man that was slain, blood. The life force given by the old gods. No matter how hard he ran, he kept tripping and stumbling. Why couldn't he get away? The figure was gaining on him. But then, facing forward again, he saw a break in the mist. Safety. Warmth. He would be able to see. But he was still losing time. Where was that howl coming from? And gods, the man was nearly on him. He tripped one last time. He thought he was a goner for sure. Robb felt light on him from his front, however. Looking up, he saw the most beautiful woman he ever knew. Daisy. And gods, she was fierce. She bore her full battle dress. Mail and leather and steel. Axe in hand, mace at her hip. He felt relieved. She was going to save him. Save him from what? The figure. He felt a hand on him. Looking back, the red man had grabbed his leg and was pulling. Robb tried to grab roots and rocks to resist being pulled. Looking up, he saw Daisy's face turn with fear. Fear for him. Why? Why was this happening? She reached her hand out to him. He reached for her. Their fingers brushed each other. Then nothing. The man was too strong. As he was pulled further into the mist, the light began to disappear. He heard Daisy call out his name in terror. He lost sight of her. And a terrible pain tore through him. And he awoke. "Me lord, you're right. You's been sweating, you are tossing and turning in your slumber." A guard in their camp looked at him worryingly. Taking note of their camp, Robb noted that a number of men were looking at him in worry, He grabbed a small handful of snow next to his furs and rubbed his face. Terribly cold and sudden, but effective way to wake yourself quick. Do not trouble yourself. Horrible dream. Torrin Karstark, sitting only a small distance away, nodded. Rob, I know. The memories of the dead never truly leave. Some of the other, blooded men, also nodded. Rob disagreed, however. Not about the dead. Ever since the Lions' War, he had developed those same dreams. There were times that he would awake and weep, and only Daisy, holding him close, could calm him. No, this dream was something else. He felt a great evil had descended upon him. Shaking himself from his thoughts, he stood and stretched. He had slept in his traveling garments. Tying his scabbard to his belt, he walked and sat on a stump next to the fire. Carl Castle handed him a piece of camp bread. Camp bread was a thing of the north. It was similar to the hard bread of the south, and the tack of sailors, yet different. Where those were simply flour and water, baked hard. Northern camp bread was slightly different. Here in the north, a man needed his energy. Their camp bread was made from oats, more energy than grain. Oats and berries and nuts. All this was mixed together with honey in a great big pot. Then, it was all mixed with melted animal fat. Once the mixture was thorough, it was poured out flat, and put out in the cold weather overnight. The result? A hard, slightly sticky, gruel bar. But between the fat and oats, a man was able to live on that. Not comfortably, but he'd live. The berries and nuts and honey were there to add flavor. Not that they particularly helped, of course. He had a bar once, made only from oats and the fat. He'd prefer not to think about that food. So, he had the camp bread given to him. Of course it wasn't particularly good, or tasty. But it would keep him moving, no time to hunt at the moment. This is the last place the villagers pointed us to. If there is nothing telling here, I fear that we'll need your grey wind, Rob. The Smalljan commented. Perhaps. He huffed with humor. But first we'd have to get him to come out of the wolf's wood. Since the war, that wolf has earned his rest. Perhaps he may have even found a bitch, and a whole new litter for the new generations of Starks. If only. Great things those direwolves. I've half a mind to chomp me own balls off and marry your brother just to get me own wolfie. Smalljan replied. Harlow rolled his eyes at his brother's comment. You always take things too far, John. Perhaps I do, Harlow, but then who'd remember me? My name shall live on forever. He shouted triumphantly. Oh, have no fear of that, John, I think no one will be able to forget you, even if they wish to. Carl muttered in teasing. The two gave each other kind-hearted sneers before breaking out in laughs. Are there any women out there that have caught the Smalljan's eyes? Rob asked. Any woman willing to give you sons and daughters to remember you? Harlow laughed. Don't ask, he'll get grumpy. Our Lord Father has already started looking for matches. Shut it, Harlow. Oh, don't be too mad, John, first Father will need to find a woman willing. All the men laughed while Smalljan stared daggers at his younger brother. Perhaps Beth Castle. She is still a maid, and a more dutiful and able woman you'll not find. Rob offered. He was neither her blood, nor her father, but the Castles were loyal vassals of the Starks for generations. If he could assist them, he would. She knows of the North, and unafraid to tell down any man or woman who she knows is wrong, wicked thing with daggers she is too. Smalljan looked uncomfortable. Many thanks, me lord, but must decline, my father will be choosing. Looking much less like a man of his third decade and more of a boy embarrassed by the notions of women. I know that Lord Meager-Sawin's sister is also unwed. If I remember, Argyle Flint is unmarried as well. Or even Gwyn Whitehill is a possible. Yes. Thank you very much. Smalljan stopped his talk. Snapping his reins, John moved faster to get some distance between the rest of the party. This only made Rob and the others chuckle to themselves. The rest of their party, and the men and hunters that joined them were all in good spirits. But Rob could see under it. Their time in the village had hardened them. They knew that soon enough, the smiles would be hard found. It seemed sooner rather than later. It was not much longer when the party heard a great cry. All the smiles and laughter died away. Come. That was Smalljan. They rode through the small paths and into another clearing. It would have been a great clearing to make camp, had it not been for the bodies. Smalljan was off his horse, with a look of horror on his face. Rob had to keep the bile from coming up. It seemed that Torren, his uncle, and Carl could not. All of them leaned and emptied their stomachs on the forest floor. A number of the guards also joined them. Before them was hell. The seven of the opened up on West Eos. It was a small clearing, only the size of perhaps 2 or 3 tables of a great hall across. In the middle, there was a stone slab. Long, but not long enough for a full person to be completely rested on. Rob knew this because there was a woman already on it. Long dead. Her throat was torn open. It was not from a blade, literally torn open. She was bare on the stone. Her torso was opened up. Her face held her final thoughts of fear and pain. Rob could only hope that it was quick for her to join her ancestors with the old gods. And she was not the only one. In piles all around the clearing were piles of bodies. Eviscerated, tortured, flayed, and destroyed all around. All of their bodies were bare. All of them had experienced unimaginable cruelty. On the other side of the clearing, other bodies were lined up, not piled, but next to each other. They had been better left unsaid. Rob. Carl, still wiping the bile from his mouth, pointed in terror to a section of the clearing had not yet noticed. It was a wooden cross, in the shape of a large X. Rob clenched his eyes shut, hoping it was just an apparition. Opening his eyes, his hopes were let down. It was a woman. The only way he could tell was because of the long hair, and the slightly wide hips. He only knew this, because the rest of her skin was flayed. Incredibly, he heard breathing. Carl and he approached. Both flinched when the woman's eyes snapped open. Tears permanently marking where skin once was. Please. She groaned out. She begged. Rob froze. All in a moment, his mind wandered. It wandered to his own sisters. To his mother. To Daisy, and his daughter. He began to weep, his skin began to tingle, his own bile began to rise up from his throat. No, no, no. Such pain and horror, such terribleness. His mind was snapped back to the present when he felt a weight in his hand. He looked at Carl. He had placed a small dagger in his palm, then gestured to the woman on the cross. Make it and. Were she not so weak, she would have shouted it, he knew. He nodded to Carl in understanding. Gently, so as to not cause her any more pain, he swiftly plunged the dagger into the woman's heart. With the last of her strength, she actually smiled at him. Thank you. With those words, she closed her eyes. Go. He murmured. Be at peace. Rob heard Carl sniffle and wipe his eyes. He turned and the rest of the men were not better. Smalljan, who had caused death on the field of battle, stood where they had found him, still. A ghostly look in his eyes. Torren and his uncle were also crying. Then, a rustling. One of the elite hunters entered the clearing. Speaking softly, as befitting the area, he reported to Rob. "Me lord, a track had been picked up." "Not yet." He spoke with finality. "Me lord." Carl and others also looked at him. "We will spend the time that it required to give each and every one of these women the burial they deserve." If any man present had objections, they didn't voice them. They all nodded and began to stake the horses, grabbing axes and any other tools that could be used to dig holes, however crudely. It had taken the better part of 2 days. By the end, the entire clearing had been turned into a burial ground. It had meant to be. Rob had wished each girl to have their own space, but as the true numbers were uncovered, individual graves began to be put so close together, that they all turned into one. The soil had been replaced on top of the bodies. The stone slab had been cleaned off, they had used snow and water to clean it, had been engraved. A small message of peace, of goodness. In a pitiful attempt to counter the unthinkable cruelty of this place. All the men, nobles and low soldiers alike, stood around, in purpose united. All were the same in this circle. May the gods welcome you with warm arms. May you see your family and friends again. May you be at peace. On earth and water, on fire and ice, on iron and bronze, I swear that I will bring the man who did this to give final judgment. Rob spoke to the silent clearing. His words echoed. And more silence. The dead can't weep, they did that enough before. But the living can. And as Rob and all his troops stood, many cried, wept, or stared off into the distance with horror. They thought of their own sisters and daughters. Of their own women. One of his men stepped forward into the clearing. He forgot his name, he berated himself. But this lowly guard, with tears on his eyes, spoke mournfully. I promise no tomorrow. For today will always last. And since each day's the exact same way, there is no longing for the past. They all knew this poem. It was a mourning one in the north. So in a great chorus, but in gentle tones, dozens of men joined in. So when tomorrow starts without me, do not think we're apart. For every time you think of me, remember I'm right here in your heart. As their voices once more quieted, the man stepped back into the circle. Clearing his throat, Rob stepped forward. Nodding to each of the men, he spoke. Remember this. Remember this moment. We will find this bastard. And when we do, we will make the gods applaud injustice. It was not a speech of battle, with great roars and cheers to follow. It was a simple message. One that each understood. Each man nodded, renewed vigor in their hearts. This bastard will fucking pay. If he knew anything, Rob knew that. Notes. The poem mentioned is called When Tomorrow Starts Without Me. Chapter 15, Stags and Horses, Bring Joy and Terror. Notes. I am literally so depressed I think the only reason I've kept going is that at least one person would be upset that this story would be left unfinished. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 310 AC. Eddard Stark. Today was the day that he had been dreading for some time. In some ways, he knew not why. Robert Baratheon was not a man who could be so easily described. In his prime, he was the charming, valiant, strong heartthrob of the Vale, and the Seven Kingdoms too. During the rebellion, he had grown to be fierce, determined, and intimidating, yet he lost a part of himself the day he learned that Lyanna had died. Eddard was not blind to the faults of his boyhood friend. There were many of them, no doubt. And at many points, he wondered if he had judged correctly to arrange a betrothal between the two. Ned would never know if he truly loved Lyanna, of course. But, he knew, at the very least, he would have never kidnapped or run off with her. And Robert had changed since the war. Little by the time that Eddard had left King's Landing in 303 AC. But he had heard the greater changes later through word of mouth. Robert I Baratheon no longer took solace in the goblets and chalices of wine. He never touched it according to the words of the Seven Kingdoms. He had organized with Cat to not have wine available for any of the feasts, regardless of what others said. But to happier thoughts, he had received a raven, from Edwyle. When the king had first begun to travel north, he had only meant for it to be a trip of low fanfare. But where a king rides, fanfare follows. And so more and more lords of the north were requesting leave to travel to Winterfell, no doubt in Eddard's mind to regale the king with stories, and requests. Thusly, the raven from Edwyle. He had decided to travel north back to Winterfell, along with all the young boys that he was warding. Eddard knew that Edwyle needed not the ears of the king, or his laughter at his japes, but if the rest of the north was convening in Winterfell, it would be uncouth for him not to do so as well. Lady Dustin had sent word that she would not attend How Shocking as well as Roose Bolton. He sent no word, but with the Boltons, perhaps no news is good news. But others were far better. Orphan Dustin, who came to represent the Barrowlands, had married Talia Forrester. A woman, of the same age and a great spirit for justice and the North. Just a little over a moon prior, she had birthed their first child, small Denise. According to Orphan, Denise was smaller than a babe of his normal size, yet, as there had been no great complications from his birth, and he had arrived only a sennight earlier than expected, the Maester of Barrowton simply reported that perhaps he would be a smaller man. Not unexpected, Despite Orphin possessing the body of a Northman, Talia was a shorter lady, yet nonetheless hard of spirit. Eddard had congratulated his children's friend on the good news. Perhaps a future betrothal could be made between Denise and the newly born Jocelyn. A bright babe of happy dispensation that was the cause of the eternal grin on Jory Castle's face. But such matters were only an afterthought of those so young. Just something to keep in the back of the mind for the future. At present, it was only himself and Cat in Winterfell. Edwyle would arrive soon after the king. Bran had planned on remaining with the Umbers, but with Lord Umber now travelling with his household, Bran would soon come too. Sansa would not come for the king's visit, however. She had sent word that she wishes to travel back to Winterfell within a few moons. Lord Hornwood had sent word that he had planned on travelling as well, though he made no mention of Arya or Darin. Thusly, he would have at least 2 of his children back with him, and possibly a third. His heart went out for his dear Sansa, but though he was always thinking of her, it was not her whom he feared for. It was his eldest and youngest. Robb and his small party had been gone for over a moon now. The last word they received of him was just before he set out from Last Hearth. As for Rickon, according to his last raven, he was still at Castle Black. Apparently, the Black brothers were spending more time than they expected readying their provisions, though they would undoubtedly set out in a fortnight or less. His mind told him to calm. Yet, there was a feeling, gnawing at the back of his mind that told him that something had happened. He knew not to whom. Robb, Rickon, Sansa. He could not say, yet, he learned a long time ago, that those strange feelings are not to be dismissed out of hand. And that's what scared him. Ned. Ya bastard. Come here. Without a measure of protocol, Robert leapt from his mount and bounded for Eddard. Before he could reply, he felt his body constrict under the great force of Robert Baratheon. The words of the South had rung true. It was not a weight of fat that knocked the wind out of his chest, rather, it was of muscle. Not near to the degree that he had possessed decades ago, but far more than before the Lions' War. Additionally, he had leapt from his horse in a way that the old Robert could have only wished for. Ned, still remembering the king's previous visit to Winterfell in which he needed a box to remove and climb off his mount with. And Eddard was cheery too. For he had seen that much of his old friend was back again. No longer leery of the shadows, eyes glazed over from drink, and out of breath from gorging food. His eyes were clear, his body was recovering, and he seemed more at peace, just from a glance. Perhaps he was still paranoid, but indeed it appeared that he was more thoughtful. Your Grace. Eddard extricated himself from the great bear hug and knelt, his household following suit. Winterfell is yours. His head was down, but he could literally feel the king's eyes roll in their sockets. Oh, get up you. Eddard once more stood, and his household joined. Apologies. I was expecting to knock into that great belly of yours. He said quietly, yet loud enough for the courtyard to hear. There were some gasps, though mostly from the servants. Robert glared at him with strong eyes that truly bore the wild spirit of the Baratheons, but they soon grew soft. Just as quick, he broke out into a grin that 30 years prior, could have melted the hearts of maids the realm over. Releasing a thunderous roar of laughter, the king threw his head back. Cat. You must tell me what you've done to dear Ned here. He actually told a jape. For a moment, Eddard stiffened. Though their relationship had not been so cold as before, and Catelyn had once more begun to sleep within their combined chambers again, she was still curt and short with him. But out of the corner of his eyes, he could see her blush. Though no doubt, she was thinking of all the ways that Cat had loosened him up over the years. Perhaps with fresh visitors, and a change in people, they could repair their own relationship. Eddard turned and inspected the rest of the king's party. It was small, smaller than even a party for a minor lord. Only Robert himself, and 3 others. He had met Brienne Tarth before, once, after the war while he still served in the accursed position of Hand of the King. He gave her a subtle yet respectful nod. Catching his eyes, she nodded in return, and quickly returned to scanning all around them. No need in the center of Winterfell, but Eddard greatly respected the conviction of duty. Her sworn brother Sir Ellery Vance stood. He was a good warrior, having served alongside Robb and Edwyle in the war. However, he was more relaxed than Brian. Not overly so, but noticeably. And the third rider. Eddard knew his face. He had met the lad once, though only that once. He had lost the baby weight and had grown into a maiden's dream himself, yet he seemed quick to befriend and respectful, Sir Edric Storm. Eddard remembered the stormy yet short-lived argument at the end of the Lion's War. At the time, House Baratheon was only the brothers Baratheon III, and Shireen, along with young Edric, though a bastard he was. Initially, Robert had declared his intent to legitimize Edric and declare him his heir, yet Jon Arryn, bless his soul, had argued against it. Much to Robert's surprise, so had he. He believed that he was not as other lords were, cruel with their thoughts of bastards, but he was also a Northman, he knew of hardship and how it could affect the realm. Though Edric may have been his only true-blooded son, he was still a bastard. And the pious Reach would not follow a bastard, no matter if he had been given a name, certainly not one that was related to the very house that brought so much destruction to the Reach, House Florent. There were many riverlords of equal piety that would also object. The Vale was largely friendly and loved Robert, though the ancestral land of the First Andals would also generally be beleaguered to follow such. Thusly, despite the North likely not having issues, the rest of Westeros was a different story. And what Westeros truly didn't need, was just another dynastic war after Robert's death. It was in that moment, that Eddard knew that Robert had changed. For instead of ignoring them and doing his own will, he nodded, gulped down an ale, and waved them off. The next day, he signed the royal decree declaring Stannis as a prince of the blood and naming him his official heir. And what truly put Eddard in a better mood? No golden-haired, green-eyed Lannister roaming all over believing they owned the very soil they walked upon. Regardless, people he had no wish nor need to think on now. Grasping Robert by the shoulder, much to the chagrin of the Kingsguard, he guided him into the keep. "Come Robert, let us enjoy the warmth of my hearth." And the courtyard began clearing. The Kingsguard followed. Eddard allowed Cat to escort Robert the rest of the way as he wished to remain outside a moment longer. He enjoyed the cold air. The bailey was now empty sides the occasional guard or servant. He was about to turn when he heard an eerie sound. A single blackbird had flown over the yard and had landed on a stone parapet. Its slow cawing grated his ears. And it seemed that the bird was looking directly at him. Suppressing a shiver he told himself was the wind, he turned to finally return to the inner hall. Though he could convince himself the chill was of the wind, he could not push away that feeling at the back of his mind. Something had happened. And he knew not what. He could hear the heavy breathing of his horse. Feel the tenseness of the muscles beneath him. Snapping the reins, he urged his mount on. As best as he could, he kept the band round his wound as tight as he could. It was a time of story and song, of joy and merriment. The main hall of Winterfell was set with a soft yellow glow. The many candles and torches reflecting off of the silver of the plates and eating instruments, and the polished stone walls. Eddard looked over to his right, past Cat, where Arya sat with Darin Hornwood. It was odd to think of her as Arya Hornwood, she would always be his little wolf pup to him. They kept stealing glances to one another. Eddard often wondered when the two of them would try for children. Though, according to some minor washer talk, apparently Darin was slightly frightened of trying for children. His little Arya was a force of nature she was. It was good to see her. With her marriage to Darin, she became more mild-tempered. She never lost that boyish outlook, but she became more refined. She still practiced every day, and Darin was open of how she was better than he with blade and bow. Yet, she no longer openly despised womanly things, she was courteous, if not for a lack of tact, with others. In other words, she had grown into a true shield maiden of the North. For a short moment, Eddard thought to himself that she appeared to be what his own dear sister Lyanna had hoped she would be. To his immediate left, was Robert. He had a plate of roast boar, and roasted roots. A large horn of ale was before him as well. It appeared that Eddard's order to Cat to hide the wine was not needed, Robert hadn't even mentioned it once. Though he would still smile and flash smiles to the serving girls, he no longer pulled them into his lap. Eddard hoped this change was for the better. His horse was getting tired, he could feel it. It was slowing down, though only marginally. But he couldn't stop, he needed to get back to Winterfell, he needed to. The wind blew through his hair. He could only hope that also gave speed to his mount. Ouch, his wound was opening more and more, he couldn't keep the band tight enough. Edwile! Cat called out. Eddard turned. Edwile just arrived at Winterfell. On his own arm was Roslyn, a beauty herself. Mother! Stomping down the center of the aisle of the Great Hall, she came around the dais and hugged him. Eddard approached, seeing him, Edwile stood straighter and bowed from the neck. My lord. Ha! Robert called out from the table. He's a little version of you, Ned, all prim and fucking proper. Come here, son. Opening his arms, he allowed Edwile to embrace him. As they left the embrace, Edwile motioned behind him, allowing Roslyn to come forth too. Lord and Lady Stark, a pleasure always. She commented sweetly. Cat waved her off. Come dear, let me show you to a place at the great table. As Cat led their good daughter away, Edwile once more motioned behind him, gesturing to the now awaiting line of children at the entrance hall. It was over a dozen boys. The boys who warded with Edwile. Ronal. Samzin. Edwile called out. Sternly, but not unfriendly. The two boys walked forward with some confidence. It was the first time that they'd seen their grandfather in such a regal fashion, all dressed for the king himself. Eddard could see in the faces of his two grandsons, of how they saw him in that moment. He imagined they believed that they were gazing upon a true king in the north. His shoulder-length hair brushed back behind his ears to his neck, a great leather surcoat crossed with a court gorget, one meant for dress and court, not for battle. Grandfather. Gods, Eddard felt old all of a sudden. Just yesterday it feels like he met Caitlin for the first time. Now being called a grandfather. The two children ran up to him as he took a knee, embracing them in a tight hug themselves. Come on boy, come on boy. He urged his mount. His vision was starting to go. Dark circles embraced his vision. But he could see it, finally. In the distance, the fortress of the heart of the north. Winterfell. He couldn't stop now, not now, when he was so close. Grandfather. The night had rolled on, some guests had retired already, yet as the host, Eddard could not do so until his greatest guest, the king, retired himself. Robert may have changed a great deal, but he never lost that love of life, so for now, he still sat, japing and storytelling. But down, in front of the dais, to the right, stood Samzin. Samzin. Grandfather, may we speak? His good daughter, Daisy, noticing Samzin, leaned down to him. He could hear what she was speaking in his ear. Samzin, your grandfather is hosting the king of Westeros, you mustn't interrupt this. She muttered. But he waved her off. Have no worry, Daisy. All is well. He turned to the king. Pardon, Robert, I must speak with my grandson. The king, pulled from a story from Arya, nodded and waved him off. Standing, Eddard guided him away from the main hall. Outside, to the tiltyard. Looking down upon Winterfell as if you were a bird, thus would be the setting. To the south and north, along the double-ringed walls, were the two great gates of Winterfell. In the center of the walls, stood the great keep, a fortress of stone and granite unto itself. Directly to the west and south, stood the great hall. To the north and west of the great hall and keep, lay the large godswood. To the east of the great keep, connected by covered bridge, stood the armory and barracks. The tiltyard was to the north and east of the keep and armory. To the south of the keep and the east of the great hall, was the main bailey, where guests and travelers were received. To the north of the great keep were the glass houses. It was in the tiltyard, away from the main bailey and primary southern gate where Eddard led Samzin to. What is it you wish to speak about, child? Samzin nervously changed weight between his feet before looking back up to him. He could see Rob's determination and stubbornness in his eyes, and the wildness and freedom of his mother too. Why do you not speak about the Kingsguard? Whatever he had been prepared for, it wasn't that. He had been ready for questions of women, he was getting to that age, or for advice. But not for this. A lump had formed in his throat, he tried to speak, but the words were caught. Clearing his throat, he steadied himself. Where is this coming from? I remember when I was younger Eddard was amused by that, by his standards, he was still incredibly young. of all the stories you told me. But you never spoke of the Kingsguard. Father and grandmother would tell me not to ask you of it. Eddard gave a stern eye. So you still ask me? Is this the amount of respect for your father and grandmother? Samson visibly shivered at his look, which he felt bad about. He gave a kind yet small smile. A jape, Samson, I know, not my strong suit. He took in a great amount of air, and let out a large sigh, turning to stare at the stars overhead. He could still feel Samson's eyes on him. I do not speak of it, because, although the moments were long ago, decades in fact, they still feel real. As if they happened only yesterday. Life, Samson, is not the great stories of life and happiness that the minstrels sing of. It is why fathers and mothers always tell their children to hold on to their childhood as if it were precious. You and I are lucky, born as nobles. But life only becomes darker, and more sad. Why do you speak of these things? I see you smile and love and find joy in duty. Samson responded, almost in a broken tone. To prepare you. Life, it is not about surviving the minor dark moments, while living in the light, rather, it is holding on to those small lights, as you stumble your way through the darkness of the days and nights to follow. Some experience such great sadness, that they never recover, others only on the outside. But what? About the Kingsguard. He let out another, smaller sigh. Another day perhaps. You have come to me and asked me as a man should have. But it is too painful of a memory to think on now. For now though, live your childhood, and appreciate it. Samson gave a pained smile. As if he loved the moment with his grandfather but was still saddened that his wish had not been addressed. Throwing a comforting arm around Samson's shoulder, Eddard led him back to the great hall. Come son, let's get you another honey cake, and don't worry about your mother, he added when Samson looked up quickly. I will ensure you don't get in trouble. And so grandfather and grandson walked back to the great hall. Samson did get another honey cake. Daisy saw, and she was about to speak with him about it. Eddard grabbed her attention, and waved it off. She may have been Mama Bear, and his mother, but he was the Lord of Winterfell. The night had gone on longer, all of the children had gone to bed, Cat as well. Robert was not long for staying. Yet just as they were going to call it a night, great yelps could be heard, and alarms were rung. The guards, hitherto relaxed in the atmosphere, stood straighter and made for the main door. Both Brian and Sir Ellery grabbed the hilts of their swords. Robert, perhaps not drunk from wine, but still tipsy nonetheless, appeared to sober very quickly. All of a sudden, the main door of the great hall, that led to the main bailey itself, was pushed open. So slowly, the eerie creak of the hinges set the hair on his back on edge. At first, nothing but empty shadow flooded into the hall, but then, a man, leaned over, clutching a bloody bandage, strutted slowly in. Arya let out a gasp, and Robert stood up. Eddard's eyes widened too. It was Carl Castle. Looking up, Carl immediately found Eddard's eyes. Rob, he muttered before his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. Maester. He called out. Someone send for Maester Lewin. He nearly ignored the sound of a guard running for the Maester's chambers. Running over to the man, he cradled his neck and held on to the bandage. Arya, Darin, and Robert came over too. Father, why did he speak of Rob's name? Her words were a question, but her tone was one of thinly veiled concern. Darin rubbed her shoulders to comfort her. Ned, where is your eldest? Staring down at the man, he turned to look at them gravely. Carl joined Rob and other men to hunt down a murderer, and Rickon's kidnapper. He could see in Robert's eyes recognition, of that year's old news. Arya, ever worried still, spoke the words that no one wished to hear. If he is here, blooded, where is Rob? Eddard knew that he should have heeded his feeling earlier. Notes. As for the ship's captain, he only saw his garb and thought him to be another customs master. As for Bronn, yes, he did assist in the interrogation of Sir Jaime, but Tywine didn't know that. And also, because I wrote it that way, I'm not really in the headspace to think too hard about anything. RN. Chapter 16, Death is not the greatest fear. Chapter text. 310 AC. Rickon Stark. Rickon, despite having yet to go beyond the wall, began to understand the Black Brothers. He had always known of them, of course. And he knew their oath and mission. But it wasn't until he actually stayed with them for many days that he began to truly see what they did. So stretched they were, that instead of leaving a few days after his arrival, as he had thought, they were here for close to a fortnight. All in an attempt to organize supplies and reorder the brothers that would remain at the war. Lord Commander Mormont refused to give leave to those brothers traveling, until all plans were made to replace them. Understandable, but slowing. In many ways, Rukan appreciated it. He had only ever shown it to his father, and no one else, but he was terrified. In many ways, he knew not why. He could guess, however. He was scared of dying, but perhaps, it wasn't death itself he feared, but knowing that he'd never see the ones he loved again. On the other hand, maybe it was fear of the unknown, fear of what awaited them. He still thought them stories to scare him, but he couldn't stop to think about what if those stories of Olnan were true, however unlikely. He thought he knew what he feared the most though. He feared failure. This was his chance to earn his place in the many pages of the books of the Library of Winterfell. Would he be known as Rukan the Rookati? Rukan the Recreant? Or would he be Rukan the Ruin? Rukan the Remarkable? Would he be able to look into his Lord Father's eyes upon his return? If indeed he did at all. This was his true fear. He only hoped that he would actually come back alive, true to his word, and held in regard by his family. Being delayed also assisted in repairing relations with many black brothers, Sir Jaime in particular. They had started out on the wrong foot. But Rukan learned that Sir Jaime was not the same Sir Jaime of the rebellion. Instead, he was concerned for his men, and that was admirable. He hid it underneath a tone of sarcasm and rudeness, but he could see it in his eyes. Whenever other brothers came back from ranging, or from another holdfast, he was the first to greet and check on them. He and Sir Jaime had reached an unspoken agreement. Rukan would not jest at the still fanciful tales of others, and Sir Jaime would not goad Rukan into insults. After this, they began to actually enjoy each other's company. Rukan learned that he shared a great deal of humor with the elder lion. His father and brothers were known for their skill, duty, and honor, and Rukan hoped he would be too, but he had always had the most inappropriate jests in House Stark. He received more glares over crude japes and sayings than any other type of misbehavior. Through this, they made many japes, sometimes taking an entire day coming up with short stories in an attempt to make the other laugh harder. Rukan was too young to go off during the Lions' War, but he had heard stories. He knew not the life of Sir Jaime prior to the war, and the man did not divulge the information himself, but so far as he knew the man, Rukan would have considered him a man of great honor and duty. Perhaps he was the only person to think that in this age, but it was his own personal experience. And after all, everyone deserved second chances. He had also sparred with Sir Jaime. He lost 2 out of every 3 matches, but that still meant he beat Sir Jaime once in a while. It was more than many, if not all of the Black brothers could say they did. On the few times he'd beat the Lion Knight, he would hear the Knight grumble and mumble about Stark strength and what not. He took pride in it. Rukan was glad to have been trained by Sir Roderick and his father. He knew of many stories and legends. His own father he knew was considered one of the best soldiers and warriors of the realm. Accounted along the lines of Lord Tarley, Robert Baratheon, Sir Arthur Dane, and Sir Barristan Selmy. Rukan hoped that he'd be known for his skill as well. Other than spending time with Sir Jaime, Rukan would spend the rest either in chambers, seeking counsel from Sir Roderick or the Lord Commander, or, staying with the Maester of Castle Black, learning of all the lore he could. His brother Bran would be proud of him, he humorously japed with himself. He would need to tell Bran of all the good books held by the Night's Watch. Bran could practically live here with all the learning. The Maester, a rotund man by the name of Samwell Tarly, was incredibly knowledgeable, but held a stutter, as if he feared to speak at everything. Rukan was not cruel, he did not laugh at others' expense, but he did find it innocently humorous. Though a quick death stare from the brother named PYP shut him up for good. Despite his appearance and character, it seemed that he was held in high regard by most of the Watch, though Sir Alisa was always short with him, then again, he was with everyone. The brother named Gren informed him that it was because of Maester Sam Wells, known affectionately as simply Sam, was both a deeply knowledgeable lore master, but also one of the best healers. Sam hadn't told him the tale, but PYP had told Rukun that while training at the Citadel, Sam had conducted the first ever operation that saved a man deeply affected by grayscale. In only a moon's turn later, they had planned on sailing him to the ruins of Valyria. Regardless, Maester Sam had set enough bones, cleaned enough wounds, driven off enough infections and diseases, that he had truly ended himself to the watch. Rukun could respect that. Having a brother who himself could never again be a great warrior, he learned young that every man and woman has their own strengths. He would not begrudge to each their own. But now, specifically a council with the Lord Commander, Sir Roderick, John Burleigh the unofficial leader of all the mountain men, Roderick Forrester, and Harry Oncastle and William Sewin. Where was Benjen Stark headed? Sir Roderick queried. Mormont grunted to Sir Alisa. Said Knight, in turn, gestured to Maester Sam. Grabbing a large scroll, the Maester unfurled it, revealing a map of the wall, and the lands beyond. Reaching over, Mormont began to speak and point at the same time. His was to be a great ranging. His task was to report with many other small rangings sent out in many directions. His first duty was to meet up with detachment of half a dozen brothers led by Caspar Cox, northeast of here, south of Hardham, upon Storrold's Point. Sir Alisa's gruff voice cut in. We are aware that he made it this far at least. Caspar and his brothers returned to the wall. About a fortnight ago. Mormont nodded. After, he was to meet with a group of about a baker's dozen of brothers just west of Craster's Keep, here. Led by Godfrey Boggs, this group of brothers were skilled. Of the 13 of them, 7 have been rangers since Robert's Rebellion, another 3 from just before the war. And 2 more over since the end of the war. Men must learn quickly here it seems. Rukun commented. Lorderling. A man who survives for a year as a ranger, should be considered blooded. A man who survived 4 decades as a ranger, should be respected more than me. He gave a humorless laugh. Some of the other lords grinned, though they too held no humor behind them. And Godfrey Boggs. A distant cousin to the rest of House Boggs. One of dozens of minor nobles that swore due to their lack of inheritance. He's a good lad, good leader, and the men enjoy him. Could use work with his sword arm though. Sir Alisa muttered, though Rukun and others caught it. Did my uncle get to them? Pointing to a scroll behind them on his desk, he began. A raven came last night. Godfrey's rangers reported that they met with the first ranger at their agreed-upon location. Afterwards, Godfrey and his men traveled south along the Milkwater, before finally arriving at Icemark. They didn't travel south immediately however, they were to patrol the valleys of the eastern Frostfangs before returning, hence their longer return. So we know he made it that far. And after this, he only had one more ranging to report with. At the Antlers Point. Antlers what? John Burleigh added from where he stood. Sir Alisa pointed on the map, where the 2 tributaries of the Antler River met up, before flowing into Storrold's Bay. The wordless exchange ended with the Burleigh simply nodding. The Black Brothers there were the largest ranging, about 2 dozen. Over half, once more, were good and experienced men, not prone to foolishness or overexcitement. Over half a dozen were fairly inexperienced however. Why would you send that many green boys that far north? Sir Roderick asked. Men and boys must learn quick here, Roderick. I once heard a brother use the words, trial by fire, a good description. If a man can return from that, he is usually fairly well prepared for other rangings. It's not like we send them alone for the love of the gods. Sir Alisa added less respectfully. Who led this group? A lad named Todder, though the watch knows him best as Toad. He came to the watch before the war. Over 10 years of ranging. This was his first command. Once more, with a large group of many experienced rangers, it is a good setting to do so. Have they returned? Roderick Forrester spoke for the first time. No. Maester Sam added, also speaking for the first time, timidly. Rukun sensed an air of fear in the room. And when were they supposed to return? Mormont and Sir Alisa looked at each other before returning his gaze. 2 days ago. And suddenly the air in the chamber became very heavy and still. How'd the meeting go? Sir Jamie approached him as the council disbanded. Sir Jamie was raised speaking noble West AOC, with a clear and strong voice. But it seemed the time he spent at the wall allowed him to pick up some lesser vernacular. Well, for the most part. Rukun didn't seem to wish to speak of the sudden bad news at the end of the council. If Sir Jaime picked up in his hesitation, he did not show it, rather, he shrugged and continued speaking. Regardless, I must thank you for taking Sir Alisa with you. I know the young lads like it when I'm able to teach them arms. He said, surprisingly humble. Sir Jaime. Wolf. His new name for Rukun, one he hated. After rolling his eyes, he continued. Why is Sir Alisa the Master-at-Arms and acting First Ranger? It appears even the Lord Commander tires of him. Sir Jaime let out a sigh, and his face took a serious turn. Looking about Castle Black, Sir Jaime affixed his eyes on him once more. He cocked his head quickly. Walk with me. And so they did. Shoulder to shoulder. Through structures and balconies, through the postern gates, and to the gate in the wall. Finally, they ended up at the top of the wall, staring down far below. Rukun had to stop himself from allowing his breakfast to come up. He learned that he was not fond of being high up in the air. A number of years ago, an army of wildlings marched on the wall. Truly. I don't remember my father speaking anything of it. Don't interrupt. He chastised friendly. True, your father did not know, as we had not informed him. Why? Because according to our scouts, what turned out to be a great army, was reported as a larger-than-average raiding party, nothing to be concerned about. I sensed that it was something to be concerned. What did I say? Suitably chastised, Rukun merely nodded for Sir Jaime to continue. You speak true, when the watchers on the wall sent word, we learned the true scale. Must have been thousands of them, thousands. Rukun's eyes widened. By that point, there was no time to send word to you father or other lords. And so we defended as best we could. Eventually, during a turn of the battle, we lost the Lord Commander, he had been struck in the head and was out cold. Your uncle the First Ranger was atop the wall, organizing the defense against the hundreds of scalers. So when a giant... Rukun was phased. Giants. Surely you jape. Sir Jaime affixed him with a glare this time. Rukun mumbled a minor apology. A giant attacked the gate, the one just below us. We were leaderless, and blooded. Suddenly, we heard a great rousing cry. Sir Alisa, he rallied us, and we were able to drive the wildlings back. And that's why the men follow him. True, in peace, he is difficult to be around, and most if not all the Black Brothers hate him, but when you step into the shite, he shows his true colors. Maybe he doesn't like his brothers, but he loves the watch itself, and would die before he saw it fell. I can respect that. Rukun confessed. Most do. The two men stood in silence, allowing the great gusts of wind to tussle their longer hair. No more words were exchanged, both staring out beyond them. Unknown to Rukun, Sir Jaime was thinking of fear too. He was a good warrior and a good ranger. But he knew what he ran into on his last ranging. He would have to gather himself to face such devilry once more. He feared for himself, for his brothers, even little Wolf he'd hate to admit. He feared for the wall, and the realm at large. As Rukun gazed on, he feared one thing more than anything. It suddenly became so clear to him. His ultimate, true, fear. The fear that he'd never find the deep-hearted love that his parents, or brothers, seemed to be lucky enough for. He wished to be able to be in the arms of someone he loved, to comfort them and be comforted in return. He didn't want to be alone. To be alone, that was Rukun's fear. The wild wolf come again, shivered at that realization. Robb Stark. He was outside. That was the first thing he noticed when he awoke. The second, was the intense pain in his body. He definitely had a cracked rib, if not two. His legs were bound, and his arms were chained to two posts behind him. The next thing he observed, was the smell. He had been in plenty of battles, and their aftermath. There was a telltale stench that hung in the air. One that choked the very air you breathe. It was the musk of blood, sweat, and decomposing flesh. And it smelled just like that here. Though he knew not where here actually was. It was dark, that was at least one thing he knew of. The only thing he could see was a small fire, as well as a few torches in a ring that he was in. There were bodies, all over the place. He swung into and out of consciousness for what felt like hours. He was hungry, thirsty, and in oh so much pain. Even when he was injured, he never felt like this. Then, a scream roused him as awake as he would get. In the shadows of the camp, a stalking figure. Behind him, he dragged a woman, dragging by her hair, only. Such was his strength that this is all it took. The woman, so far as he could tell in the darkness, was nude, bruised, and bloody. Help! Somebody help! She screamed out. The only response was the most sadistic chuckle he'd ever heard in his life. No one's coming for you, pretty thing. From where he was chained, he watched as the man threw the woman on top of a table, and with ease, strapped her down from her limbs, easily fighting off her attempts at escape. Then, the man took out a knife, and slowly began to peel the skin off the bottom of one of her legs. Rob wished he had been born deaf, the screams were unbearable. This is what he had sworn to end when his father dispatched him. And now, he had failed his people. How could he ever regain their trust? Selfishly, he was gladdened that the man was seemingly disinterested in him, perhaps he thought he was still out cold. His attention was once more pulled to the screaming woman and the horrible man. A terrifying growl. Not a noble or deep one of a direwolf, this was of a mongrel. Rob wished he could tear his eyes away as he watched the man lead a large mongrel to the table. The beast started to sniff the bleeding leg, and the exposed flesh. In the blink of an eye, the beast leaped and snapped its jaws around the leg and thrashed, chomped, and tore away. The woman's eyes rolled up in pain, back arched, in a vain attempt to run away from the terrible pain unjustly brought against her. The worst thing. The man was laughing. It started out as a snigger, then grew to a chuckle, and eventually a shrill, psychotic bellow. Finally, the man pulled the mongrel away, with the woman's right foot in its maw. By now, the woman had passed out from the pain. As the mongrel began to chew on the flesh, the man began to rack the woman's torn-off foot. Not yet, pretty thing, there is so much more fun to be had. He spoke darkly to himself. Rob struggled not to gag. Chapter 17, Writings and History v. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Excerpts from A History of Unified Arms in Westeros, abridged. Archmaester Belus, published 370 after Aegon's conquest. Westeros, by and large, has followed the natural way of war. This has been through the levying of a lord's small folk, his men-at-arms, and any sworn knights. This can be complemented by sellswords and hedge knights. Prior to Aegon's conquest, each of the 7 kingdoms largely followed this method. A few exceptions was the chivalric Order of the Green Hand, the closest thing to a permanent military force in the Reach. As well as the Winterfell Honor Guard, similar to other noble guards, the North's Honor Guard also acted at the king in the North's personal levy, and even in peacetime, would be sent out occasionally to handle issues considered vital to the crown. After Aegon's conquest, Aegon I Targaryen issued a number of laws, including the famous Golden Laws. However, a far less known law, though very much prevalent, was the Bull of Swords and Shields. This law made it illegal for any noble in the newly established realm of the 7 kingdoms, to fund and sustain a standing force greater than the need of a household guard during peacetime. It was because of this that the Order of the Green Hand died out, only carried on in spirit by the Mandaelis of White Harbor, far less storied than the tales of bravery in the face of dragon fire at the Field of Fire. The first instance which the Citadel has been able to find that upset this strict law, occurred in the north. Under the lordship of Eddard Stark, the now legendary lord that is considered to have helped save the realm from the Second Darkness, the Hunters of the Guard were established. Officially, this body was an extension to the Honor Guard. Indeed, this is only considered the unofficial start of a standing army. This body was formed by Eddard Stark after Robert's rebellion. The first, true, standing army, however, officially, was still created during the reign of Robert I Baratheon. Though, in reality, it had been the work of his brother and heir, Prince Stannis. Under his regency, the king's forces was created. Headed by the Captain General of the king's forces. When this was first announced, it caused a wave of anger throughout Westeros. Including, primarily from the Four Wardens, even including Eddard Stark, infamous for his loyalty. They feared that their long-standing rights were being taken away from them as the traditional foreholders of military power in the realm. It did not help that the first captain general was a junior noble from the Riverlands. Under the reign of Stannis I Baratheon, known before his coronation as Stannis the Stern, though given the epithet of Stannis the Iron-Willed, the king's forces were reformed further. Stannis I implemented a strict policy of merit-based movement, similar to the Night's Watch. This did not sit well with the nobles at all thought. Near the end of his reign, the Great Uprising spelled doom for the young Baratheon dynasty. Not all was lost though. Great hope was put on to Stannis I's heir, Prince Raymond. The Great Uprising severely depleted Stannis I's ailing health. Though he would emerge victorious and live through it, he would not survive much longer. After he died, Raymond I Baratheon reformed the king's forces once more. He separated the forces into two distinct groups, the men-at-arms, and the officers. The men-at-arms would keep the meritocracy that it had become known for. However, all officers were required to be knights or of noble birth. Though, he allowed all officers already serving, regardless of station, to remain. This was seen as a compromise for the realm. Raymond I had great assistance from his good father, Lord Robb Stark, in rallying the other great wardens. With the four wardens on his side, the rest of the nobility, begrudgingly, accepted. Under Raymond I's son and successor, our most gracious and magnanimous king, His Grace Bohemond I, also known as Bohemond the Beast, the king's forces are being put into use for the first time as an invasion force. Yesteryear, His Grace announced the launch and invasion of the Stepstones. Not an attempt to suppress Essozi pirates, but now an occupation, and eventual annexation. This will be a thrilling time for all of Westeros to see how the king's forces stand against an external threat. Excerpts from Rolls of the Kingdom 79 AC. Master of Laws and Clerk of the Rolls, Lord Roderick Arryn. *** King's Peace. All petty lords and knights and nobles shall take their grievances, disputes, and conflicts to their liege lord. The liege lord in question shall rule in such a case, and those lords and knights shall be hitherto required to abide by such a decision. 2. It shall be the right of all petty lords, knights, and nobles to send, by raven or messenger, a writ of appeal to the king. However, the king shall not be required to hear the case and may allow the previous liege lord's ruling to stand. The king may, at their discretion, appoint the Master of Laws, or others commissioned to stand in, to retry the specific case if the king has no personal interest to sit, but political interest to hear the case. 3. All grievances, disputes, and conflicts between those of great houses shall be arbitrated by the king or crown commissioners who are duly appointed. Such decisions made here shall be supreme and may not be issued a writ of appeal. 4. It shall be the responsibility of the Master of Laws, to, in good faith, enforce all laws issued by the king or the king in council. The Master of Laws shall possess the right to issue commissions of reaving to any men-at-arms or knights who wish to enforce peace in the Seven Kingdoms. V. All crimes considered evil by the faith of the Seven, the Old Gods, and the Rhoynar, shall be considered an offence against the king and therefore, a breaking of the king's peace. This includes but are not limited to, murder, theft, rape, kidnapping, arson, poaching, the stealing of crops and livery, and sheltering criminals. 6. All accusations of treason against the Iron Throne, or any accusations or crimes committed against the royal family, regardless of where they were done or station of those involved, shall have immediacy in the royal court of the Iron Throne. All crimes relating to treason to the Iron Throne shall be overseen by, if not the king himself, a bench of 3. Of which, the Master of Laws shall be one. *** Golden Laws of Aegon I Targaryen. All small folk shall be hitherto required to pay a tax, of commensurate, but fair value set by their lord, once every year. Should a person be unable to pay such a tax out of currency, they shall be compelled to substitute this for valuable goods such as cattle, horses, jewelry, or any other commodity that can be measured by value. 2. All individuals who collect taxes from the small folk shall be entitled to collect them by virtue of their lordship, not by their family or house. Only those individuals who sit as lords as prescribed by long-standing laws of inheritance, or by the Iron Throne's grace, shall be afforded the right to collect such tax. 3. The Iron Throne shall withhold the right to, at any time deemed fit, send knights inquisitor, tax investigators, or any other crown commissioner to a great lord or petty lord, This shall be done to ensure that all nobles are paying the correct taxes, and to ensure that lords do not overtax their small folk. Rule of 6. No man may, through course of anger or judicial punishment, strike their lawfully wedded wife more than 6 times. Rule of thumb. No man may strike their lawfully wedded wife with an instrument thicker than the thumb of said wife. Magor's laws on the activities of the holy. It is forbidden, for any man or woman who is officially or unofficially associated with the faith of the Seven, from bearing arms of any kind. Those that actively preach the faith of the Seven, yet are not recognized by the Starry September, shall be considered accessories to this ruling. 2. It is expressly forbidden for any holy order associated with the faith of the Seven to organize. This shall include the warriors' sons or the poor fellows or any other body attempted to be raised for any purpose in the name of the faith of the Seven or the Starry September. 3. It is forbidden for the faith of the Seven, or any order acting in their name, to issue their own trials or courts. The law of the Iron Throne shall be supreme. Any attempt to override this, or pass this, shall be considered treason against the Iron Throne. Widow's Law. The Iron Throne hereby recognizes that the kingdoms of the Crown Lands, the Riverlands, the Vale, the Reach, and the Westerlands follow strict and agnatic primogeniture. This shall be subject to the considerations made by a lord's written or spoken will. Thusly, such primogeniture shall be tradition and custom, yet not set in stone. 2. The Iron Throne hereby recognizes that the Kingdom of the North follows male preference cognatic primogeniture. This shall not be subject to considerations of wills or wishes. Thusly, though sons inherit before daughters, daughters inherit before uncles. 3. Regardless of succession, the Iron Throne hitherto demands that any successor continues to maintain their predecessor's consorts, regardless of station. This shall continue until death, or written, signed, and published writ of release by the consort with witnesses is made before the Lord's liege lord. 4. No lord, or lady regnant, shall possess the power to unilaterally bar children from a previous marriage to the succession of the lordly seat, even if said noble remarries and sires additional children. Right of first night. It shall be considered an offence against the Iron Throne for any man, lord, knight, or small folk, to engage in the act of first night. Should such an instance be found to have occurred, it is the responsibility of the lord to punish the knight or man, the liege lord to punish the lord. It is encouraged that should a petty lord or man believe their liege lord to have committed the crime, to report this to the Iron Throne immediately and without let or hindrance. Trials of Crown. All trials, regardless of station, shall be allowed to start with a blessing from the faith of the peoples involved. 2. All witnesses, accused, defenders, and all others involved in a trial shall pledge to the Iron Throne and to their faith to be honest. Any occurrence in which an individual is found to have broken this oath is grounds for their own trial. 3. Any knight or noble, accused of any crime, shall withhold the right to demand a trial by combat. They may fight for themselves, or may declare a champion in their place, subject to the champion's agreement. Death within the trial by combat is not considered murder and is not subject to such laws, given the death was found to be fair and within the expectations of the trial. Similarly, an individual may demand a trial by 7, following the same rules set by the previous trial. 4. Should the accused be a member of the royal family, they must name a member of the King's Guard as their champion, unless otherwise allowed by the king. Should the accuser be a member of the royal family, they may name any individual as their champion. Laws of inheritance. All lines of noble succession are recognized by the Iron Throne within the previously decreed widow's laws. 2. A lord shall possess the right to disinherit an older child, for the preference of a younger, so long as such a decision is not based on the legitimate motherhood as found in the widow's laws. 3. All changes to inheritance a lord wishes to make must be presented and confirmed by their liege lord, or the king. Gowling and holding. Though it is the understanding of the Iron Throne that for practical purposes individuals may need to be held in dungeons or other fortified areas prior to their presence before a trial. However, it shall be considered law that all individuals, regardless of rank or station, must face trial within a year of their arrest and gowling. 2. To ensure the previous article is enforced, all landed knights and petty lords shall be required to send a record, at the turn of every moon, to their liege, detailing any gowling undertaken so that the liege lord may ensure proper and fair justice. Those individuals found to have arrested and gulled without sending records shall themselves be accused of slavery and shall be sent to trial before their liege. Sentencing. Only landed knights and lords may carry out the king's justice, in that, the ability to carry out the sentence of which was prescribed at a fair trial. Knights sworn to the service of another house, or have no landed house themselves, may not unilaterally carry out such sentences, unless otherwise commissioned by those that are able to. 2. It shall be reserved to the noble in question regarding sentencing, however, there are limits. Execution shall only be considered for the crimes of treason, murder, rape, excessive theft, banditry, desertion from the night's watch, or any other crimes prescribed by the king. Notes. I thought I would add this as a sort of accessory to the previous miniseries. I personally enjoyed the world-building aspect of it and it allows me to distress helps with writer's block for the main story. I hope you enjoy it, if not, think of it as a little bonus. Chapter 18, The Wolf's Circle. Notes. Hello all, I know I have not updated in many months. Since the beginning of 2024, I went through a really terrible event and for a long time I didn't even know what I was going to do with myself. This particular chapter was half written around the time of this significant life change and I sat on it a while, debating whether to continue or pass the torch to another volunteer writer. I realized I like this too much. I had, and have, so many good and creative ideas for this series and I thought it would be a shame to let that all go. Apologies for the shorter than normal chapter. I cannot promise that I will upload at the pace that I was last year, but this story is definitely not forgotten. Chapter text. 310 AC. Eddard Stark. Come my love. Bran and the Umbers arrived some time ago. You must finally meet with them. Catelyn gently urged her husband. Since Carl Castle stumbled into Winterfell's Great Hall and passed out, Eddard had been busying himself with seeing that the man wakes as soon as possible. But he was no maester, and Lewyn had been increasingly losing patience with his lord of getting in the way. But Carl had muttered Rob's name before falling under. Eddard wasn't daft. He knew that something had gone wrong, incredibly wrong. But how? Rob led nearly 100 men, from the Umbers and Karstarks no less. Not to mention a detachment of hunters. They were good soldiers, elite. All of them had been veterans of wars. The older ones of Robert's Rebellion, the younger ones from the recent Lion's War. And yet, only Carl Castle came, blooded. Rob was in trouble. He just wished he knew sooner, so that he could save his son, his heir, his sweet, sweet boy. Robert is here. He was always good with people and entertainment. He mumbled. He heard Kat enter the room in full. His back was to her, so he did not see as she reached her arm out and forcefully turned him around. Eddard Stark. You, and no one else, are the Lord of Winterfell. Warden of the North. I'm worried too, but you do not see me sulking. Now get your ass down there now and greet our boy and his enamored woman before I drag you. His eyes widened. Rarely, very rarely, did Catelyn ever raise her voice with curses. He could count on one hand since they'd been married. Finally grinning, he pulled Kat in as she huffed and walked away. Oh no you don't. She gave a faux feeling of resisting. I really have no time for this. But he could feel her relax, and her muscles loosen as he held her. Apologies Kat. You're right of course. Give me a moment. I will be down soon. Good. So, Bran, is he truly infatuated with this Umber girl? Kat's lips turned into a grin. Oh Ned, you should see him. Never seen a boy so lovesick in my life. She chuckled. I know of her, Lara Umber. I'm surprised you approve. With her being a shield maiden and whatnot. Oh, I shan't ever find it truly comfortable. For the first time though, Bran is smiling and laughing with someone to whom he isn't related. He sends longing glances her way, only to turn when she looks at him. And she does the same. Eddard chuckled. If only they were brave, like us. They both laughed lightly at the sarcasm. Ned and Kat were the greatest pair of awkward people at a marriage in West AOC history. That could be excused due to the prevailing issues of the day, but regardless. Eddard walked through the halls of his family's ancestral keep, passing through corridors and posterns. Finally, he made it to the great hall, where he found the Umbers and his son waiting, gathered. The great Jon, with his enormous size, was the first to see him. Ned. At his exclamation, the rest of the family turned as well. Small Jon and Harlow had travelled with Rob, best not to think about that now. His daughters had joined him as well as Bran. Will Umber also made the journey with his father. Due to his absence, Eddard only assumed that Robard Umber remained in Last Hearth in some capacity of Castellan or acting lord. Contrary to his normal behavior, the great Jon kneeled before him, and solemnly reported. My Lord Stark, High Chieftain of the First Men, I hereby implore your forgiveness for our intrusion, and humbly request safe hearth at Winterfell. For all that the great Jon was boisterous, loud, brave, and warrior-like, he was also a Northman at heart. Northerners did not have the same degree of pomp and ceremony as the Southerners had, but there were traditional matters that they too must recognize. That was why the Northman was considered the greatest defender of their culture. As for the High Chieftain of the First Men, that had been a subsidiary title of the king in the north for over 1,000 years prior to the landing of the dragons. After Aegon's conquest, and the assumption of the title of King of the Andals, Rhoynar, and the First Men traditional thought had expelled that title. However, after Jaehaerys I Targaryen gifted, foolishly gave away, the new gift to the Night's Watch, the many lords of the North came together in a gathering to discuss options. Such an act almost cost the realm a civil war. The rest of the realm never realized that, but that one decision by Jaehaerys I nearly caused Lord Alaric Stark to declare war. Surviving private records of House Stark indicate that it was only through the instrumental diplomacy of Alysanne Targaryen that soothed the hearts of the Northmen. The dragons, and the realm, never knew how much they owed their survival to that single queen. However, regardless, a large amount of respect had been lost. Privately, but consistently, since that time, the Lords of the North have insisted on referring to the Stark in Winterfell as the High Chieftain of the First Men. To remind them of their true defender and protector. Arise, my Lord of Last Hearth. You will find home and hearth at my seat whenever needed. Eddard realized he would need to fill him in on the news, he would not have known as he had been traveling. Lord Umber, after the welcoming has been made, please find me in my solar. My guards will escort you there. The great Jon affixed a confused but shrewd eye on him, but he simply nodded. The same lord continued to introduce his family. This here is my daughter, Lara. Lara Umber had been true to her descriptions, she was shorter than her father or brothers, but still tall for a woman. But what truly stood out was her frame. Broad shoulders led to strong arms. These were not the arms of Brian of Tarth or Alysanne Blackwood, strong things but wiry and fit. Lara was sturdy, arms like trees, a torso like a bull. And she arrived not in a dress, but in chain and leather. Eddard could only assume that Daisy and Brian would enjoy her presence. And next is my little sweet, Jarell. Said woman blushed at her father's words. No doubt feeling embarrassed at his words. Jarell Umber seemed to be the opposite of her sister in character. Jarell was only slightly shorter than her sister but was not as strong. Additionally, she not only embraced, but enjoyed the womanly arts of homemaking. He hoped that she and Cat could get along. Eddard knew of Lord Umber's wife. Serena Liddell had been a ferocious thing. Eddard remembered Great Jon when he was only a young heir himself. He enjoyed the drink, women, and battle. But at one of the harvest festivals, that he had missed in the Vale, word had reached that the heir to Last Hearth had met a woman that could finally match him. She died after birthing his youngest, Will. To this day, the great Jon would drink heartedly and laugh and jape about women, but as far as Eddard knew, he never actually purchased the services of another woman. And he never remarried. Then again, the boisterous Northman was shrewder than he let on. The introductions were finished, and Cat led Jarell to enjoy tea time. Bran offered to show Lara around the castle, it had been her first time here. Blushing and scratching his neck the entire time. Will Umber had decided to settle in for the day. But Lord Umber, their work was not yet done. Very rarely does Eddard Stark summon a lord to his study without good reason. I know something has happened, Ned, what is it? The two older men sighed as they sat in his solar. Eddard never was one to beat around the bush when it came to matters of foremost importance. Carl Castle stumbled into Winterfell yesterday. He was blooded and hanging on to life. He only muttered Rob's name before collapsing. He has yet to wake. Maester Lewin is with him now. Lord Umber's eyes widened but made no other reaction. Any word, on my boys? None, none about yours or mine, John. And none about the Carstarks either yet. We must wait upon the skill of my Maester. Silence overtook the Solar as the great Jon processed the news. Finally, after licking his lips, the descendant of giants looked him in his eye. I have followed you into war thrice. Without doubt, or question. Give me the word, and I will send a raven to Last Hearth to call the banners. Eddard looked at him sharply. We know nothing yet, John. I cannot call the banners against an enemy of which we do not know. Come off it, Ned. You know as well as I do who in the north would most benefit the death of its heir. And I cannot move without proof. We must await the words of Carl. I cannot wait that long, my lord. And why not? Because my boys, Ned. No word on my boys at all. You have my sympathies, but I will not call the banners of the north until we know of who to march against. You will do nothing. I never said that. What about Rob? I know. His shout ended the conversation. Once more, silence reigned supreme. Apologies, me lord, John started slowly. I should not have raised my voice under your roof. I let my blood get the best of me. Think nothing of it, John. They let themselves calm down. The faint sound of wind from the window was the only sound to be heard in the room. We're getting old, Ned. Eddard responded with a sigh. Don't I know it? What are your thoughts? I think, the best way to force this issue, is to turn it on the north itself. Call the banners, but do so not for war, but for justice. Send ravens that all the houses of the north are to assist in the search of the heir of the north, as well as the heirs of House Umber, and those of House Carstark. I would be wary of that, John. The rest of the north may take that to learn that three of some of the most powerful houses are weak and may attempt to strike further. There are more snakes in the north than just House Bolton. That is true, Ned, but those others are weak too. House Whitehill is on its last inheritable male. Gwyn is a fine lass, but her father is a dastardly man who hates the fairer sex. He would not risk his last son on such a gamble. And House Ryswell. Old Roderick is nasty, he is, but his firstborn died against the lions. He has two more sons. His surviving daughter holds Barrowton, and Lord Bolton is his former goodson. Yet, the Lady Dustin is constricted, although she may hold back her banners from marching south, she cannot compel her banners to rise against House Stark itself. Despite his death many years ago, many remember the friendship between you and the late Lord Willam. As for Lord Bolton, the old fart will not risk open war for a house he no longer has a stake in. Bolton will be his former goodson forever, but being the former anything, means nothing. No grandchild of his will sit the dread fort in the future. And his other sons. Certainly a matter that should be considered, but with the other 2 points nullified, much like House Whitehill, he will not risk confrontation with only his sons and no other guarantees. Eddard always knew that beneath the brutish behavior of John Umber, there was a shrewd mind hiding. He always valued his advice, and in his own private thoughts, appreciated the friendship that had sprung between them over the decades. Eddard himself being forced into the role of Lord of Winterfell quickly and without all the knowledge of its lords. He was just about to respond when a knock was heard at the door. Enter. The door swung open and Sir Oliver Free, Rob's former squire and one of the captains of the Winterfell Honor Guard, stood in its entrance. Apologies for the interruption, me lord. Yes. What is it, Oliver? It's Carl Castle, me lord, he has awoken. Eddard stood fast and made for the door. Lord Umber on his heels behind him. Chapter 19, Don't Poke the Sleeping Wolf. Notes. Hello all, I hope you have all been well. As noted in my previous chapter, I went into a very dark place for a while and I had no motivation to write anything at all. I have completed this chapter. The next one is also close to being finished as well. I do hope you'll forgive me for such a long delay. I cannot promise that updates will become consistent again, but I am slowly getting back into writing. Chapter text. 310 AC. Eddard Stark. Carl Castle was a mess. His body was so wet from his sweat it appeared he had just swum in a river. Across his torso was tied a large bandage, no doubt wrapped around many times tightly. Another bandage was upon his forehead. At his entrance, Maester Lewin bowed. "My lord." Carl stirred at the sound of voices. "Lord Stark, forgive me." Eddard rushed to his side and leaned in. "No worries, Carl. Please rest. What tales of woe do you bring?" "We had traveled from Last Hearth along Last River. We had made camp in several small villages and met with local aldermen. We did not know specifically where this culprit was. Lord Robb ordered our force to split in two." "For what purpose?" Carl tried to swallow, but his throat was too dry to do so and let out a great cough. Maester Lewin hurriedly fetched a small horn of small wine to wet his throat. After a number of tellings from the villages, we had narrowed down the location of the culprit to one of two places: the forests northeast of Last River with the border of Carhold, or the area surrounding the tributary of Last River itself, set within Bolton lands itself. Who was to lead these forces? Lord Robb ordered half the men under the Smallgen to begin their search in the Bolton lands under a letter of marque. He took with him Torren Karstark as well. I and Cregan Karstark joined Lord Robb in searching the forests near Carhold. At this point, Lord Umber had sat in another chair in the room. Not so close as Eddard, but enough to hear the low voice of the injured castle. We had made it north of the river when we made camp for the night. All was well. His story was cut short by another rack of coughs. Eddard noticed the man's body shivering and trembling throughout. All was well until the moon had reached its peak. Lord Robb had gone to his tent, as had most of the other men. All that remained was me and Cregan Karstark. Suddenly, Cregan stood, drew a dagger, and plunged it in my stomach. Both Lord Stark and Umber gave each other glances of confusion. Cregan Karstark was not the most loved Northman, but he was Northman, nonetheless. Had he gone mad? I don't know, me lord. But I had seen enough violence from the war. I knew a good stab when I saw one. I yelled out but pretended to be in my final throes so he wouldn't finish me off. So many of the men were out scouting or fast asleep. Lord Robb rushed from his tent and made battle with Cregan and was beating him. However, all of a sudden, a dozen hounds rushed from the forest and ran through the camp. One ran up to Robb and clamped on his leg. Cregan was able to disarm him. Damn that man. Carl suffered another racking of coughs. I was useless in a fight regardless at this point. As they bit on Lord Robb, another man cleared from the woods and approached. Cregan and the man who led the hounds conversed. I was able to slowly crawl away. Eventually I got to a horse and galloped away. No doubt they noticed my missing body though. A man led these hounds. Did you get a good look? No, only from the side. A hulking, but lithe man. Pale as the moon, with hair as greasy as a fish. Carl began wheezing as the pain overtook him. Eddard felt the maester move behind him. Forgive me, my lord. I must insist the patient rest now. His wounds were most grievous. He will have a long recovery, if he recovers at all. Eddard nodded to himself and looked over to Lord Umber. Yes, yes, of course. He muttered lowly, his mind anywhere but in the maester's laboratory. Eddard escorted Lord Umber from the room and walked beside him down on the halls. Me Lord Umber began. We must do something. However terrible, we now know of the general area. Let us strike hard, ride in with a great force and hunt this evil criminal down. Lord Umber raised his voice, expecting the famously cautious Eddard Stark to resist. He had no need to, however. Eddard agreed with him completely. Say no more, John, I am calling the banners. However, I can no longer count on the loyalty of Carhold. John Umber affixed him a serious gaze. For a Lord Paramount to say that out loud, it was very troubling. Me lord. I cannot trust a house if the close cousin of the Lord has directly caused harm to the heir to the north. Now, the two men were striding with great gusto and fervor to the yard, where the king had been training. Around them, soldiers started to appear. Lord Umber, I can no longer trust House Karstark. You will ride for Last Hearth, raise a host, and march on Carhold. Do not insult Lord Karstark, but ensure that the castle is blockaded. Lord Umber looked sheepish. He knew how he liked to bluster and insult his enemies. Sir Roderick, Raise a host of 200 men, and order Maester Lewin to call the banners of House Castle, Sewin, Frost, Condon, and Lock. Order House Hornwood to patrol the Hornwood and close the border with House Bolton. Aye, my lord. Sir Roderick replied before he rushed away. Sir Jory, send for Samson, Etwile, and Dacey. Have the Winterfell domain on high alert and begin training replacements for the guard. Yes, lord. Sir Jory did the same as his uncle. By the time Lord Umber and Eddard reached the yard, the king had noticed their presence. Ned. What is all the racket? This have to do with your boy. Eddard knew the king did not voice it, but Robert has always had a special feeling for Rob. Not only his namesake, but the loyalty he showed in the war left a lasting respect in the eyes of the king. Robert, I followed you thrice, against the mountain men of the Vale, against the Targaryens, and against the Greyjoys. Will you follow me? Robert looked deep into his eyes and only nodded. Ned, I'd follow you to the gates of the Seven Hells. Where do we ride? We ride for the north. The entire household was gathered in the courtyard. Hundreds of soldiers as well as the king and his kingsguard, and Samson and Edwile. Samson, until we return with your father, you must be the Stark in Winterfell. Your uncle Edwile shall serve as your regent. You have the castle, he holds the north. Is this clear? Yes, grandfather. The excitement of his first appointment mollified by the reason he had it. He loved his father dearly, and he could only hope he did not end up like many of the guards that never returned with Carl Castle. Upon one of the horses was Dacey Stark herself. At first, she was ordered to remain at Winterfell, however, she explained to her good father in no uncertain terms how she would be joining the host. Lord Umber had laughed at that. Speaking of the giant lord, the Umber had already left to ride for Last Hearth, to lead a host raised to march on Carhold. I'll send word to the capital, have the small council investigate anything they've heard. I know you already suspect one of the Northmen, but we shouldn't discount some southerner pulling the strings. The king commented. Thank you, Robert, that means much to me. Of course, brother. With that, the king turned and strode from the tiltyard, to prepare himself to join the host. I'll have my kingsguard join us as well. He called out without turning around. Eddard found himself in his private chambers. He and his mount had already been prepared, but he wished to see Catelyn off one more time. He found her in Rob's and Dacey's chambers. Sitting on the bedding, with her back to the door. Cat. She did not respond. Slowly approaching around the bedding, he saw how she wept, whilst holding a toy that had once been Rob's as a child. Oh, Cat. She immediately leapt in his arms. Find him. I couldn't take it if our sweet boy, my sweet little boy. I Cat. We'll find him. And when you find out who did this, you'll hang them from gibbets, burn down their keep, won't you? Eddard tried to comfort his wife. My, it seems my lady wife is no longer some trout from the south, but a fierce wolf mother. She simply stared deep into his eyes. I am now. We have already seen too much death, Ned. Do not make me bury mine own child. On my life, Cat, on my life. And with a few more words of well wishes and comfort, Eddard left his wife. Making his way to the courtyard of Winterfell. Mounting his steed, he snapped his reins. We make for Castle Sewin, he announced to the party of soldiers. And from there, we ride for blood. Sir Barristan Selmy. Any word on the stepstones? Prince Stannis demanded. None, Prince Hand. All the songs of my little bird sing of tales of conflict on Essos. Varys stated calmly. It appears that the chief mistress of the Archon was murdered. It had been blamed on the local contingent of Mirish diplomats, who had done nothing to endear themselves to the Tiroshi guilds, and were slaughtered. At present, Myr and Tiosh appear to be at the brink of war. Both are vying for the support of Lys, and I have no doubt they will throw themselves to whomever promised to help them with the Dothraki. The Dothraki. What do they have to do with this? Sir Willis asked. Well, in recent moons, the Dothraki seem to be setting their focus on Lys, and its outlying protectorates. Although they are more than able to spend the coin on sellswords, they understandably wish for the other daughters of Valyria to shoulder the burden as well. Will they threaten Westeros? Lord Tarly questioned. Lies. No, my lord Tully. But, Myr and Tiosh are known for waging wars that get out of hand. It may very well be the start of another great trading war between the two. The mood in the council chambers darkened. Sabaristan understood well enough. When the free cities engaged in trade wars, one of many tactics was to board, pilfer, and impress trading crews into their navies. A policy that the Iron Throne was not tolerant of. Fear of impressment, and the raiding of goods made traders and merchant captains wary of sailing. When they were wary of sailing, the major ports, from White Harbour in the north, to Gulltown, King's Landing, and even Sunspear saw a decrease in commerce. Not tolerable by the Iron Throne indeed. Prince Stannis turned to Lord Seaworth. Davos, is the Royal Navy prepared for any possible breakout in the Narrow Sea? Aye, Your Grace. The Royal Navy number some 200 vessels. Some are here, but most are anchored at Dragonstone. Since I've been appointed, I have made sure that at least one squadron is prepared to set to sea with one word of a raven. Sabaristan noticed how Stannis nodded to himself. He knew that Davos Seaworth was the only man that Stannis Baratheon actually trusted completely. A rare thing indeed. Though he kept it to himself, Barristan had an inkling that when the time came for Stannis to sit the Iron Throne, he would have Davos as the hand of the king as his first act. He couldn't blame the man, he was very capable. Who commands the ships? Grand Maester Gorman asked curiously. The 3 squadrons here in King's Landing are under the command of my eldest, Dale, Sir Ormond Wilde, and Sir Julian Cox. Lord Davos rattled off from memory alone. There are about 10 squadrons at Dragonstone. I shan't waste the time to list all of them, but among the commanders are another son of mine, Allard, Sir Tristan Roger, heir to Willowwood, and Sir Godfrey Shettt. Stannis ground his teeth and stared at the table as if it had insulted him. Finally, he once again met the eyes of Lord Seaworth. Send word to Dragonstone. I want 4 squadrons put to sea within the moon. I want them to patrol the narrow sea and ensure that the free cities don't take our sailors or ships. I shall leave the decision of overall command to you. You know the commanders the best, you know who would be best suited, appoint them as Admiral of the East. Something to give them seniority over the other commanders. The Grand Maester nodded before Lord Davos could respond. Have no worry, Lord Seaworth, I'll have the Raven fly before the sun sets. The Master of Ships bowed from the neck in thanks. Sabaristan sighed internally. Another war in the Narrow Sea, just how many would he see in his lifetime? Chapter 20, A Cosmopolitan North. Chapter text. 310 AC. Brian of Tarth. Lord Meager Sewin, Lord of Sewin, met Lord Stark's party at his gate. He was an older man now. He sat upon a destrier, yet Brian noted how he bore no riding leather, nor weapons of true use. She noted a dagger, but one for lordly status, not for the long ride ahead. Next to him, sat a younger man, though not by much. The host from Winterfell numbered 200 riders leaving the gates of the castle. Though King Robert was in attendance, he had made it clear it was Lord Stark's host. Therefore, as can be expected for a liege to greet his vassal, 'twas Lord Stark who snapped his reins and trotted closer to the Lord of Sewin, not the Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. My Lord Stark. Lord Sewin bowed from his place atop his mount. Lord Sewin, it gladdens me to know you received my raven. Aye, my lord. Long had I been a companion to your late father and bore his son loyalty. I would see my late friend's grandson safe. I have seen fit to call a portion of my banners. Apologies, but only 50 riders could be called upon due to the late hour of the raven. Fear not. More shall come. Many thanks, it heartens me that you would see my house safe. I must say, Lord Sewin, 50 shall be enough from you. I have no doubt about your zeal, but we must move quickly, we cannot wait for more. I am sure your fellow lords will also be sending a force as well. Brian noted Lord Sewin's nod. He had expected that answer, she realized. Lord Sewin had himself seen 3 wars, let alone assisting with wilderling hunting. He knew of the need for speed in battle. I thought as much, me lord. Sir Kyle Condon shall lead the Sewin host in my stead. My brother is with your boy at the wall and my son is at Moat Cailin. I have grown old, I fear, according to my maester, the days of riding in the saddle are past. May he serve you as well as he has served me. Brian, accustomed to the ways of the South, found it odd, the degree of respect Lord Stark showed to Lord Selwyn. Although by no means a simple masterly house, House Selwyn was still quite small and did not have a great host or treasury. Of course Stark was to show his bannerman respect, but to this degree. Then, she remembered House Penrose in the Stormlands. Also quite a small house. Of course, Lord Selwyn mentioned his companionship with the late Lord Ricard. Brian thought to herself. Lord Selwyn's voice broke her thought. Hail, Robert, first of his name. Selwyn had finally greeted the most powerful man in Westeros. Lord Selwyn, your axe will be missed. Keep your hearth warm for us upon our return. Roared the king, sending a ripple of laughter throughout the host. Of course, your grace. He responded. Regardless, the host is prepared, Lord Stark. They ride at your will. Lord Stark nodded. Good, many thanks Major. We ride east, towards the White Knife. We seek to make camp upon the shores. Though we will more than likely not make it by nightfall. Ah, then you ride hard. Lord Selwyn replied. He turned to the rest of the host. I pity you all. His Grace knows well that when Eddard Stark, the quiet wolf rides, naught but death itself can stop him. Another wave of chuckles spread. By this point, Brian had lost interest and began preparing for the host to ride. Last words were exchanged when Lord Stark called out, We ride. And so, with the host larger by 50 riders, they turned eastward and the snapping of reins were all that could be heard. What's on your mind? Brian had to focus again. Her liege, the king was looking at her. Your Grace. Since we set off, your eyes have been set on the horizon. If I wasn't with Ned and his riders, I'd be worried about being protected. She blushed due to her mistake to care for her charge, but she knew him long enough now to know when he made a jest. Still, she would have to ride herself. It's just what the Lord Selwyn said. He said naught but death itself could stop Lord Stark on a ride. I wonder what he meant by that. Well, Ned is known for setting a hard pace. When we had been in the Vale, and that up-jumped fucking lizard Aerys called for our heads, I sailed for Storm's End, and Ned for Winterfell. He had been able to call the banners, hold a council of war, and march the army of the North from Winterfell to Stony September in only 6 moons. Brian's eyes bulged at this. The North was the largest kingdom in Westeros, being able to encompass all others together. Simply calling all the banners of the North would take many moons. She knew that the North typically only fielded an army of 20 to 30,000 troops. She would guess, should the North have paved roads, and faster ravens, they'd be able to call on more men than the bloody Westerlands. To be able to call, man, organize, and march 20,000 men from the capital of the North to the Stony September, in only 6 moons was the epitome of skill and determination. He must have been a very good commander. She commented. Oh, he still is. The king countered with. You've heard the rumors of course, but if it hadn't been for Ned and his force of Northmen, I would have been found and executed, and Ned too, and maybe these damnable Boltons would sit the North. Robert moved his reins so as to avoid a rock in his path. Not that they'd last long, of course. Even before this shite, the North hated the Boltons. If they'd been given the North, they would find knives in their throats within 2 generations, and a knife in Aerys a generation after that. Tyrion Lannister. My lord, your lord father has summoned you to his solar. Thank you, I will be along shortly. Tyrion responded to the servant dismissively. He had just finished writing down a portion of history. Though he was not a student at the Citadel, he always loved reading and seeing as how he lived through some great and perilous times. He had thought it was wise to jot down, less polite, more direct stories for his successors. Sabron, having been idly drinking and manicuring his fingernails with his dagger, stood and walked behind him. Tyrion flipped him a piece of gold. Dragon for your thoughts. None, me lord. Though of course, you never really know with your father. Tyrion pretended not to hear him mutter scary fucker under his breath. Though of course, I will be keeping this. He said cheekily. Tyrion rolled his eyes as Sabron stuffed the gold dragon down in his coin purse. They soon arrived at the door to his father's solar. As before, the lion's fangs were standing in guard. This time, expecting him, one knocked on the door. Come. was heard through the door. Wait here, Bron. Sir Bron simply leaned against the wall. Tywin gulped and then entered the closest thing to a lion's den as he could imagine. His father sat at his desk, resplendently gilded in gold and finery. Father. Come, sit. Read this. Tyrion took the proffered raven scroll as he sat down. Ah. So the daughters of Valyria are starting another trade war, HM. Yes. Tywin answered brusquely. And yet, this small council does nothing but wait. They are reactionary when they should be proactive. What would you have done as Hand? The moment news arrived, I would have sent an emissary from the Iron Throne, with half the Royal Navy behind them, threatening sanctions and war on any party that impressed West AOC sailors and then gave military support to the city that was the most open to working with us. Well, at the very least Prince Stannis has sent a squadron out to the Narrow Sea to patrol. Lord Tywin did not respond. He leaned back in his chair and stared at Tyrion. This issue, however, is not your concern. If our sailors are impressed, I will take it up with the small council. You on the other hand, have a different responsibility now. I am the heir to your name and this castle. Staying here is my responsibility. You will do as I say, and I say that you shall sail for the north. Tyrion sat gobsmacked for a moment. The north? Why? I am tired of the lack of information coming from the north. The king rides north, the heirs or spares of half a dozen influential houses are warding in the north, and all of the Stark sons are on expeditions or lording over their own castle. Things are afoot. Especially if one were to believe the ghost stories coming from my spies at the wall. Spies? The wall? You thought I wouldn't plant spies where my eldest son was going? He may have destroyed the Lannister name, but he is still my son. At the very least, someone needed to be there to stop any foolish notion of him jumping from the top of the wall. Tywin took a sip of his wine before sitting back down on his desk. I dislike being in the dark. Already I am barred from leaving the Westerlands unless by royal command. You shall travel north and be my eyes and ears. You will tell me what is happening in the north, and you will determine if there is any way for us to profit from it. Very well then. It does not seem that I have a choice in the matter anyway. You do not. His father rudely confirmed. If that is the case, I shall need a party. Of course, you are my son, and heir. I shall cover the expenses of that cutthroat you call a knight, and a host of 30 red cloaks. You may take any other persons you wish, though you will cover their expenses. You will set sail from Lannisport and seek out the port at Flint's Finger. From there, you shall travel to Moat Cailin and then Winterfell. Have you any query? None. Then begone. You will leave within the se'night. I shall have ravens sent to confirm your travel and arrival. Tyrion hopped off of the chair and walked back out in the hallway. As the door closed behind him, Sir Bronn approached. So, what did the big lion want now? It took a moment for Tyrion to answer. Finally, he sighed. Bronn, you may actually kill me this time. Bronn widened his eyes at that. Oh, this'll be a good one. It seems that for the foreseeable future, we will be going to the north. Bronn just sighed at that too. Well, I'll be charging double for that then, little lord. Denied, but nice try. Tyrion turned to smirk up at Bronn as they strode. This would be a fun journey. The end.